Hello and welcome back to Off Track Podcast with me, Dave Neal. This week, proudly sponsored by Mick Pringle Motorsports Photography. Make sure you check out Mick's work on his Instagram page and his Facebook page. Just search Mick Pringle Motorsports Photography. Give him a like, give him a follow. Alternatively, just hit the links in the description below. My guest this week is a Yorkshire legend. He's ridden the TT, he's ridden Macau, he's ridden the Northwest 200, and he wasn't too shabby on a trials bike either. But before we get started, while you're here, if you haven't already, please make sure you like and subscribe to the show. The more likes and subscribes we get, the more people see us, the better chance we've got of bringing great guests like our next one. It's enough from me, really, so let's get on with it. Ladies and gentlemen, the fantastic Nick Jefferies. Enjoy.
You can start it.
Well, I'm going to start.
I'm not.
We'll do it. Nick Jefferies, welcome to the show. What an absolute pleasure to see you. Thank you.
Well, you said some very nice things already, Dave, and about visiting the house out in the middle of nowhere in sunny Bradford. And it's lovely that people say nice things about Bradford. I'm a big Bradford supporter. We live in troubled times these days, as folk know, but where we are here, it's a little rather nice enclave.
One thing I get to do every now and again is travel to some beautiful parts of the world, and this is no different. We went out to Spike Edwards up in Nidderdale just before Christmas, and the journey over here was no different. So thank you. It's an absolute pleasure.
Well, it must be a great pleasure to come out of Lancashire into Yorkshire for a day. Go on, get that one. I know you're from Lincolnshire.
It's nice to get away.
I'm going to get that one in. Even though Barrowford, I think, was virtually West Yorkshire. I know Barnoldswick was West Yorkshire. Barrowford's always been Lancashire.
Yes, the boundary moves, doesn't it?
It's very close.
Barnoldswick and Gisborne and that way on. Depends how the locals and the pitchforks
go. I've got mates from Barnoldswick, Barlick.
From Barlick,
and it's
indeed.
Definitely, that's West Yorkshire as far as they're concerned.
We have a great patron of ours called Mick Strickland, and I'm not sure which side of the fence.
Which side he bats on?
I don't know which side he bats, but I think he's a Lancastrian.
A lot of these things, boundaries are defined by cricket, by the way. I'm not a massive cricket aficionado these days. I played lots of it. My father's very passionate, but a lot of these boundaries are defined by cricket in this part of the world. Either that or sheep. Less said about sheep, the better.
We can move swiftly on from that one because that takes us down a whole different road.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
We're going to sit and have a chat today. We'll talk about your career. You have an incredible career off-road with trials, which is where it all started. But I think a lot of our viewers will know you for your exploits around the Isle of Man and your factory rides through.
Let me correct you on an incredible career. If this was being watched by any of the Lampkins in Silsden, and Silsden is owned by the Lampkins,
it is, yeah.
They would not think my career was anything like incredible. Because the bar is very high in West Yorkshire, or in Yorkshire. The bar for trials riding is extremely, extremely high. So, yes, I had a career, but if Sid Lampkin, Arthur, John, any of the Lampkins are watching this, they may not because they're not into road racing, but they won't think my career was incredible, let me tell you that.
You're such a modest man. I mean, seriously, for what you did on the trials bikes before, the Scottish 6-day, the Scott trial, winning the Manx trial, the same year that you competed in the Manx GP.
A lot of folk think I won the Manx Grand Prix and the Manx 2-day in the same year. I actually was so drunk after winning the Manx 2-day, which was the fault of a well-known trials rider called Tony Calvert for pouring neat alcohol down me when he shouldn't have been doing. The next morning was the day of the weigh-in for the Manx Grand Prix, and I was dead to the world. And I didn't bother getting the bike ready, and I just turned up and rode round. And even this is Tuesday. The Manx was on the 250 race was on the Tuesday. I was still recovering from winning the Manx 2-day on the Sunday. I've never been as drunk in my life. So I'm not a big drinker. I left all the drinking. It was said that Tony Jefferies and Nick Jefferies, they drank an average amount, but Tony drank all mine. So I didn't win the Manx 2-day and the Manx Grand Prix, contrary to popular opinion, in the same year. But I did win it. I was one of these guys that persevered because we're jumping on a bit for how I arrived at the Manx Grand Prix, really. My dad rode it. When I won the Manx Grand Prix, it was 50 years to the year, not to the day, that my father had actually ridden the Manx Grand Prix in 1933.
Good grief.
On a Works Scott, even though Works bikes were banned. He rode an experimental 4-speed Scott, which at Quarterbridge first lap stuck in top gear. But he got it round a lap. 6-lap race in those days of Manx. It didn't finish, but that was his one pre-war Isle of Man outing. But not a lot of folk will know that he rode at the TT in 34 as a reserve for Triumph team. He'd signed for Triumphs in the winter, fed up with Scots. And he rode with Triumphs with Jock West, who ultimately finished second in the 39 Senior TT on a Works BMW. But Jock West and Tommy Spann, who famously rode in a coloured sweater over his leathers. I think he was called the Wasp. Incredible. Was Tommy Spann. He was Tommy Spann, Jock West, just forget the other rider, but the manager was a bloke called Harry Perry, and he was watching at Gooseneck one morning, and my dad came tearing up. He knew he was at Gooseneck with Dad, so he's put a good show on. Flew into Gooseneck, came out too hard. Don't know if he high-sided in those days, but he fell off it.
Yeah,
and he landed badly on his elbows and his knees, and he shouted. Neal Hodgson used a similar word. And it started with that word that Neal Hodgson used, F motorbikes. I'm not going to use it because I'm sure my daughters will watch it.
Indeed. We're a family show.
Family show. And then all he could hear was a laughing. There weren't many spectators at Gooseneck on an early morning practice in 1934. All he could hear was Harry Perry laughing. He didn't race the race that year. He was just rode as a reserve. So he never actually rode the TT. He didn't ride a TT till after the war, when he finished second twice in the Clubman's TT. And in 1949, he finished second to someone called Duke. Jeff Duke, they called him. I think he became quite well known.
He did all right.
Yeah, he did all right.
Yeah, he did okay. He did okay. I mean, was it fairly inevitable that you were going to contest the TT after your dad Alan, brother Tony?
No, not inevitable. And I'll tell you why. What happened was I started trials in 1968 on the ex-Works Gordon Farley's famous trials rider, Gordon Farley's Works Cub, which I still have. My brother, meanwhile, had just started his racing career, and it became, through 68, 69, got better and better and better, and became, it got serious in 70, 71, and he rode for Triumphs in 71 and won 3 TTs. And his career overlooked, no problem at all, everything I was doing. Meanwhile, I was progressing as a trials rider. I arrived in the 73 Manx 2-day trial, finished a good third behind Malcolm Rathmell and Martin Lampkin, and went to watch the Grand Prix, which I'd watched many years before. I've been there every year to the Isle of Man since 1953. Watched at the Gooseneck, saw Jeff Duke come round on a Works Gilera as a demonstration lap, because it was the 50th anniversary of the Manx Grand Prix, from 23 to 73. Watched the race, and one chap who I knew fairly well from Leeds, and I'm not going to give you his name, came round the corner at Gooseneck so slowly. If my dad had been watching, he'd described it. He was going so slow, he leant the other way. You can't lean the other way going around a corner on a bike, by the way. But he was desperately slow. And I'd arrived to watch on a demonstration BMW bike that we had from the Jefferies shop. And I thought, if I can't get round the TT course faster than that, I need a good kicking. So I'm not going to give you this chap's name because it's still above ground. However, I decided I'm starting racing. And sadly, a week later, my brother crashed at Mallory Park and broke his back and never raced again. Everyone worshipped what Tony did, and he continued to be a prominent figure in the paddock. After that, nothing could quell the spirit of my brother Tony Jefferies. Nothing. And of course, it paved the way for David Jefferies. And in a later story, later on, we can talk about David. But anyway, a week later, Tony's in hospital with a fractured spine and never walked again, never raced again. It did lots of things going very quickly, but it didn't involve actual racing on a motorbike. So many stories about what my brother still got up to, despite the fact he was paralysed from the chest down. But anyway, that's another story. We'll move on to that perhaps later. So what do? Well, we needed someone at the shop to run the shop. And so all hands on deck to run the shop with my brother in hospital. But stupidly, I rode a trial in winter on my brother's Bultaco trials bike, fell off it, fell down a cliff, broke my leg in 4 places, early December 73. So my brother was in Lodgemore, Sheffield, with his fractured spine in a spinal injuries unit. I was in Harrogate General with a bit of pneumonia, having been laying out on the moor for about 4 hours, and a broken leg. And my poor dad must have just thought, well, what are we doing? And things were looking bleak. But I got my plaster on and got crutches and got back to work. And then the doctor said, well, your leg's not strong enough to go back to trials riding straight away. So I bought a TD2B Yamaha out of my own money, cannot have gone down well with the family. There's no one around today in the family who will recall that, but I think it was probably not a great move family-wise at the time. But I was determined, having watched the Manx Grand Prix and this guy leaning the other way around the corner, I'm going to go and get my licence and race the Manx. And to be honest, when I started racing, my only ambition was to go and race the Manx Grand Prix.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was it. I had no ambition. I was trials riding. I was in 74 was a ridiculously busy year for me because not only was I'd riding for Yamaha that year, Yamaha with under Mick Andrews in trials, and I led the Scottish 6 Days trial on a Yamaha. 2 years running, I think I led the Scottish 6 Days. But I was also riding International 6 Days trial, they call it Enduro now, for Jawa, for the British team. So I was training for that as well, with Welsh 2-day international, Catterick camp training sessions. And I was doing, and then I started racing. And my only ambition was to get my national licence so I could go to the Isle of Man in 75. Meanwhile, a chap called Keith Medley rings me in the end of 74. I'm jumping a lot of stories here, but he rings me up and says, we're going to do the 10 lap production TT.
10 laps.
10 laps. 75, it was a 10 lap. Le Mans start, 10 lap, 2 riders. Would you want to partner Ian Martin? Which will probably mean nothing to a lot of people listening, but Ian Martin had a son called Guy Martin. So I'm partner to Ian Martin in the 75 TT on a Gladwin's Insurance Norton. It all went a bit pear-shaped. When the first lap of practice, Ian went off first and crashed at Sarah's cottage and fractured his spine. Fortunately, not paralysed, but immobile. Immobile, can't ride. So we had to rope in another rider. The bike was wrecked. I'd ridden over on a production road, a road Norton, to stripped my bike to rebuild the race bike, what was left of it. They didn't crash very well, interstate or commando frames. They bent very easily. Oh. And Sarah's cottage won. Norton Commando 0, and Ian Martin, Nobles Hospital. And the things were very bleak on the Monday night practice. So we got it back out on Thursday with a lot of my bits and some of the Gladwin's Insurance bits. And I've got a picture of me upstairs. The bike's naked, there's no fairing. But we got it out I had to practice by Thursday.
Yes.
We got it out and did a lap. The bike had a slow puncture. So I did the lap with a slow puncture. Yeah, which for a trials rider was not a problem.
Well, no, I suppose it
but I got the lap
towards
in.
Your skill set.
I got the lap in. Then we did some laps each on the Friday.
Yeah.
And the 10 lap race was Saturday, by which time we had a fairing on it. So I've got a picture of me with the bike on the Norton with the full fairing. And we finished we finished 45th on that bike. But I've got a finisher's medal somewhere.
Yeah.
We finished 10 lap race.
We have to finish.
Dick Pipes from Hull, sadly, has recently passed on. He was our co-rider. And I remember I actually did the Le Mans start. So we ran across the road, kickstart, but a little bit of tiny string holding the kickstart in place, kicked the bike up and set off down Bray Hill. I don't know, would there be 50 of us going down there? Yeah. The likes of Neal Tuxworth and Charlie Williams will be in that race on the smaller bikes probably. Yeah. But I remember charging down with Helmut Darner, charging down there on his BMW, who was a hot man. Of course, Slippery Sam was ridden by Alex George and Dave Croxford.
Of course.
So I don't know how good you are in Slippery Sam history, but it was ridden in the 1970 TT with a chap who we've just lost called Tom Dickey, finished 4th. Got its name because it always blathered oil out, Slippery Sam. And a chap called Ray Pickrell won in 71 with my brother second. In 72, Ray Pickrell won it again. And in 73, my brother Tony Jefferies won on Slippery Sam, the TT. So that was 3 in a row. Then a chap called Mick Grant.
Granty.
Granty, who now lives in Lincolnshire, but we'll not hold that against him. Mick Grant won in 74, although my brother would always admire that it had disc brakes on by then. It had a big Fontana front braking when my brother won on it. And in 75, it was a 10-lap, 2-rider race for Alex George and Dave Croxford won in 75. They didn't notice that Nick Jefferies finished 45th, and nobody would know that. And that Guy Martin's father was meant to be my co-rider, but wasn't. It was a real mismatch race. But that particular time in 75, the first week of May, I did the Scottish 6 Days trial and led that on the Works Yamaha. Sadly retired whilst lying quite well placed with a hole in the piston. I went straight from there to Prague and then drove to Bratislava to ride for the British team on the Works Jawa in a European 2-day championship. And I came straight back from Prague. A little bit of a story in the Prague airport where my visa was lost, and I was put in a cell for about 2 hours with a guy, an armed guard, because my visa was missing. But we got out of that. We sorted that out. This was behind the Iron Curtain in Czechoslovakia in those days.
Yeah.
Different world. And then got back a couple of days and then off to the TT, to race the TT. So in Scottish 6 Days, European 2-day championship, Enduro, road racing. It was a bit of a busy year. But in July, Sammy Miller, famous Sammy Miller, by the way, I've just been to his museum, and if anyone wants to go have a really interesting day out in the New Forest, go and see the Sammy Miller Museum, because it's just unbelievable. It's incredible. And I love my old bikes, and there's a lot of old bikes I recognise, but there were some I didn't. Sammy's the most incredible person, and he took us around very kindly, me and an old pal of mine, John Metcalf, worked Suzuki rider back in the day. He took us round, and he's 91, is Sammy, and you wouldn't believe he was a day older than 70. He was sprinting up and down stairs. His enthusiasm, it makes me realise that I've lost quite a bit in the old age, more into golf. Can I mention the golf word?
Absolutely.
Yeah, follow to word. But anyway, play a bit of golf these days, and sort of bike racing has slipped away a little bit, perhaps, nowadays. But these are stories from the old. But how did we get talking about Sammy Miller? Oh, yeah, Sammy Miller signed me. He signed me to ride for the Honda factory trials team. And they were coming with the first of the 4-stroke trials bikes. And it was an incredible time to be in. And this chap, John Metcalf, works Suzuki rider. His dad, Dixon Metcalf, always said, "You two, you don't know how lucky you are. My son's got Works Suzuki ride, you've got Works Honda ride, and you're in the pub every night drinking." We didn't know how lucky we were to have these bikes with Japanese mechanics working on the bikes. They were heady times doing the World Championships. Managed to get Honda's first ever World Championship points in March '76. Look of shock on your face. Yeah, it was reasonably decent. I'm not a lambkin. I'm not a lambkin. I'm not a lambkin, but I got their first ever.
But these little points of the first Honda points and
the first Honda points, yeah,
they are achievements.
Yes, I got a telegram from Japan.
History. Yeah,
I got a telegram from Japan. It was in Japanese, but it was
never mind the Silsden Massive. This is what we're talking
Silsden
about.
Massive. Love it, yeah. That sounds like Chris Kinley in the Isle of Man. The Ramsey Massive. So Sammy assigned me to ride for the Honda Works team. But meanwhile, I'd said, well, I've got an entry in the, not only entry in the Manx Grand Prix, but I'm off to the Scaries 100 this weekend. So the Scaries in just outside Dublin. Yeah. So I went off with a chap called Stuart Jones, who's still around, pedalling his bike around. And off we went to race the Scaries 100. When we're doing all right there in the Scaries 100, they give you about half an hour's practice on the Friday evening, and that's your lot. And the racing starts midday the next day. So it's unbelievable. And the big field is a paddock, and the tents up for the and the secretary said we were the only, Stuart and I were the only English visitors. They invited us into the tent before the last big race, the Scaries 100. We got invited into the tent with all the officials because we were English visitors for a drink. So half a pint of Guinness later, I'm on the start line, the charge round on my TZ. And we're missing a lot of stories out here, to be honest, Dave. Anyway, we've got to charging round, and I dived inside Sam McClements on the last corner to snatch 4th place. Charged up to the finishing line, and something went very badly wrong. And I'd be careful about saying it was Sam's fault, but anyway, we collided on the finishing line, and I scooted off into the bank and hit a signpost that was covered in straw bales, and was knocked about quite badly, actually. And the bike was knocked about, but I had to get back because it was that was Saturday, and I had to get back and get myself in shape because the following week was my debut on the factory Honda Trials bike. So I rode it, and it was called the Alan Jefferies Trial, which is a famous event. Sadly, we don't have it nowadays, but big national event in the Yorkshire Dales. And it it would be up into Nidderdale where you saw Jennifer and Mike. So it was a fantastic big trial in those days, but I was very second hand. I think I wobbled round to finish fourth in the end. First time out on this Honda. It was a beautiful bike. It was titanium this, magnesium that. It was such a trick bike. And then so I stayed with Honda for 3 years. I didn't dedicate myself enough because I was doing enduro and I was doing racing. I was going off racing. So sadly, Sammy, I lost my job there with Sammy late 77 because I clearly had not dedicated myself sufficiently to trials. And nobody, using dedication as the bar, nobody in this world has ever been as dedicated as Sammy Miller. He took everything to the next level, this Sammy. And amazingly, for someone born in 1933, he still does.
It's incredible.
Because the museum is just something else. Second time I've mentioned it. Well worth a visit if you can get down to Bashley Crossroads and see the museum. It might take 15 quid off you.
Probably. But you mentioned Mick Grant, and Mick Grant is another great name in the sport. We've had Mick on the show.
80 last July.
Indeed.
Mick. Yeah.
And still doing his trials now.
And he will still ride the hard course, not the easy clubman's course. He'll still ride the hard course in the Yorkshire Classic Trials and other events. So they're not easy. I mean, they're not as hard as World Championships.
No.
But for old bikes and old men, they're quite demanding. And he's incredible, isn't Mickey? I keep telling him that.
He absolutely is.
I don't want to praise him. But yeah, you've got to just take your hat off.
Steve Plater didn't last week either, and he was a massive influence in Steve's career as well. I'm not giving him anything. He's a fantastic man, and hopefully we'll have him back on the show before too long. Because again, like yourself, the stories. I just sit here and listen. It's a privilege for me to sit and listen to the stories.
We could do a whole podcast on the stories about my dad, and because his career started in 1923. My dad, his first ever event was in November 23. I've got the programme on a Triumph Ricardo that he borrowed in the Scott trial. Not any old trial. The Scott trial was his first ever trial. Didn't finish. Took him 6 years to finish. But my dad was riding in the early 20s when they were doing hill climbs, sand races, road racing at Eschalt Park in Bradford. I think they ran races there till about 56. He was doing, obviously, and trials. So they did everything, did Dad, in the 20s. I've looked in this cupboard here, there's a gold medal from the International 6 Days Trial, Geneva, 1929. And he rode there on a Scott. He rode to Geneva, did the 6-day event. Didn't have trailers in those days.
No.
They rode to the event. They rode there, got the gold medal, put a set of plugs in each day, because Scots used to eat plugs. New pair of spark plugs every day. Finished, gold medal. I've got the gold medal. Incredible. And my dad, he'd won the Scott trial in 32. The last man to win the Scott trial on a Scott machine.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Got a nice picture of him. I'll show you a picture of Dad winning the Scott.
Scott trial, was it the same course every year?
Oh, no. The Scott trial, unrecognisable. From the original route in 1914, started in Saltaire, Shipley, outside of Scott Works.
Yeah.
I went into about 5 different dales. Nidderdale, Coverdale, Airedale, Wharfdale, Littondale. It did 5 dales in those days. And then by 32, it got quite a confined course. So confined that by the time he won it again in 37, it was the last time they ran it in West Yorkshire. Started at the Hopper Lane Hotel near Blubber Houses, lovely name, and it started there in 37, and it moved then, briefly, 38, because it didn't run in 39. 38, it ran in Osmotherley and Swainby in North Yorkshire, on the Hambleton Hills.
Yes.
And then it 46, 47, 48, 49, it ran there. And then there was a big dispute between what became the East Yorkshire Centre and the Yorkshire Centre. There was a big split took place. And so my dad and a guy called Eddie Williamson were the main protagonists in getting the Scott trial moved from Swainby to where it is now, which is above Reeth, and run then by the Darlington Club and now by the Richmond Club. And they do a fantastic job. And the Scott trial, for those that have never been to a Scott trial, it's the hardest one-day trial in the world. It's been dominated by the likes of Malcolm Rathmell, Dougie Lampkin, Martin Lampkin, Sid Lampkin, Arthur Lampkin. They've all won the Scott. And Sammy Miller won it 7 times. Graham Jarvis, Jack Price has won it, I think, 3 years running now. and there's some outstanding riders do the Scott. I think, didn't Guy Martin ride it this year? He got about, I think he did about a quarter of the distance.
Leon Haslam's tried it, I think. At the time.
Rob McElnay. Well, now then, back to Mick Grant.
Yeah.
My brother and Mick Grant had this continued, not feud, but Mickey taking out of each other. Mick Grant, very capable rider.
Indeed.
Rode the Scott many times. Never finished on time. Never got a Scott certificate. The top few get spoons.
Yes.
And the next finishers, like a finishers award, they get a certificate. This is to certify that XYZ completed the Scott course on time. Granty got round once or twice. Correct. Granty got round once or twice and never on time. Now, my brother finished the Scott in 72 on time. We had to undress him. He was completely wrecked out because he'd been seasons racing. You can't just go and do the Scott trial.
No.
You're not trials fit. He did it and finished. And I would think the certificate is now his daughter Louise, Luby Jefferies, known to many in racing paddocks. She'll have that certificate on the wall as one of my brother's proudest possessions. And he never missed a chance to say to Mick Grant, £5 for that certificate. Inflation may have taken place, but anyway, £5 for that certificate. Mick would just shake his head. Bastard, something like that.
In true Mick
So brilliant
style.
as Mick is, in truly outstanding, no Scott Tile certificate, as far as I'm aware. Although he may have one forged now. If my brother was still with us, there'd be something going on. Continual feud there.
Some nefarious activities between them.
Yeah.
But for the Scott trial that I read over the last couple of days, 77 miles, 77 sections.
Look, Scott trial. Let's get one thing. In Yorkshire, as I said before, cricket, sheep, but if you're into motorcycling, Scott trial.
Yes.
And famously, you're not a trials rider unless you've ridden the Scott. Never mind, finish it. You've got to start it. Not everyone can finish it and finish it on time. But if you at least enter the Scott, that can make you a trials rider. If you haven't ridden it, you're not a trials rider. So at least Granty rode it.
He did.
Yeah, and Rob Mack and I can just the name is slipping me now. I mean, Guy Martin, he won't get round. I'm afraid. Guy, simply, it's not a bit harsh. Brilliant as Guy was on a race bike, you've got to be pretty handy trials rider. I mean, in fact, very handy trials rider to get round the Scott, even out of time, as Granty managed it.
Yes.
He got round out of time. But to get round on time, and then to get a spoon, I think that's next level. And then to win the Scott, well, my dad won it twice.
How many spoons do you have?
I have 12. But they used to give gold spoons for the top 6.
Yeah.
No, sorry, now they give gold spoons. They didn't give them when I finished top 6. You got a silver salver. So I would have 12 and a gold spoon. But anyway, Toby, it is what it is. There are folk who've got more. But
I'm sure.
Yeah. They give it on the programme. It's very nice to give a little list of Scott spoon winners and the most spoons. I'm on the list. But I'm not well up, but I'm on the list. But you'd be amazed how many folk get round it.
I don't know the trials world too well. I've had a little bit of dealing with Sam Winterburn, Chloe Richardson.
Richardson is a part of the Richardson family from
That's right.
Richmond. Yeah.
Yes.
What they don't know about the Scott trial, one can't help thinking, but those that were local sort of knew the way around better than non-locals.
Strange that, isn't it?
Strange that, yeah.
And
I'm not saying any more.
Malcolm Rathmell's granddaughter, Carly.
Carly is a daughter.
Oh, daughter, sorry.
Daughter. Yes. Yeah, Carly.
She was in the BSB paddock.
Carly and Sonia.
And she does a lot for a lot of the riders.
She's a bit of a social media girl.
Press office, that's right, yeah. I can't remember if it's granddaughter or daughter.
Carly's known to the Jefferies family. Yeah.
Indeed. Lovely family. So the move that came into road racing more, when that came more to the fore, early 80s into the...
It was early 80s. But what I'd done, I lost my Honda ride through bad behaviour and drink, too many parties and not enough dedication in Sammy's eyes. I would say that then Sammy was a different Sammy to the Sammy we see nowadays.
Yes.
Sammy, in those days, I didn't have him down as a great manager, great rider, a fantastic driving force. It didn't inspire me. I'm going to tell you later about a man that did inspire me when it came to racing, who gave me the confidence to be better than I thought I was.
Big word.
Sammy never gave me the confidence, sadly. I'm sorry, Sam. You're a great man. And you know that because we had to kiss and make up once at the Ulster Grand Prix. He knew that I'd had a bit of a rough deal with him and all that, and my fault maybe. But years later, at the Ulster Grand Prix, Joey, Philip and I had a tremendous scrap on Castrol Hondas around the Dundrod, which is one of my favourite circuits, Dundrod. Sadly, it's not with us right now. Can't imagine it'll come back, but I wish it would. And if it did come back, I'd go and watch it. But anyway, had a fantastic scrap, and I think I probably finished third behind Philip and Joey, but we all went round together and gave the crowd something to watch. And Sammy had been over there because obviously Irish, used to go over here, see his old mates in Ireland, came to watch the Ulster. He might even have been doing a parade lap. But he came up and said, "Sure enough, you're going well. Let's bury the hatchet." And Sammy and I, when he rang me last week and invited me down to the museum, so we presume the hatchet is nicely buried and all that.
I think that's well and truly.
Yeah, because
fantastic.
It wasn't my strong point, wasn't trials riding, in Sammy's view. But maybe I'd made up with the racing. And, of course, Sammy should have won the TT famously, was leading the TT in 57 lightweight race when he crashed at Governor's Bridge.
So close.
You wouldn't have known that Governor's Bridge wasn't the Governor's Bridge that we raced today in that particular event because the clip circuit didn't do the twisty bit. He did the clip circuit, the shorter 10.79 mile circuit, and he was leading Tarquino Pavini down to Governor's Bridge, and the front end just tucked away where the road dips.
Yeah.
It was a fast right-hander. None of this hairpin.
None of the nook now. That was straight
that was for the
round.
mountain circuit.
Yeah.
But the clip circuit didn't use it because it was deemed to be too tight anyway.
Right. Okay.
Too twisty.
Yeah.
So they had a fast right-hander. Sammy binned it then and pushed in to finish fifth, I think. It works Mondial. Sammy finished third in the 1957 250cc World Championship on a Works Mondial. Sammy was absolutely brilliant at racing. There's a picture of him at the museum winning the Northwest 200 with someone called Halewood just behind him. That's how good Sammy was. So sorry, Sammy, I've criticised you a bit, but, you're an amazing road racer and international 6 days trials rider and a scrambler and trials, everything. Just brilliant.
Before we move on to the road racing side of it, tell me about the inspiration from Dad and from brother.
As a child, growing up, we had quite a few privileges. Dad was an ACU official, he was a chairman of the Benevolent Fund as well. He was on the competition committee of the ACU. Regularly went down to Pall Mall, London, where the ACU was in those days, for meetings. But we'd be every week as kids from my earliest memories are mid-50s. We were going to either a trial, a steward, a scramble, a sprint, a road race, Alton Park, Cadwell Park, trials on the Yorkshire Dales, scrambling, mainly the Yorkshire Grand National at Carlton Bank, the Cleveland Grand National, not the Yorkshire Grand National, the Cleveland Grand National at Carlton Bank, very near to where that Scott trial started, Swainby, Osmotherley,
yes.
North Yorkshire Hills. We used to love going there, my brother and I. And then also Boltby for the North versus South Scramble at Boltby near Thirsk. And we were regularly going to that with Dad as a steward. And so we had lots of heroes. One big hero was Arthur Lampkin. He was either trials riding or scrambling. So Arthur Lampkin was number one hero. His younger brother Sid Lampkin. There were Jeff Smith. We watched Jeff Smith regularly. And scrambling was quite big round here in those days, bigger than it is now. But then we were going to road races, Alton Park. Remember meeting Bob McIntyre as a starry-eyed 8-year-old, maybe in 1960. Watching at Old Hall Corner, watching at Lodge Corner with my brother who's 4 years older. So we'd be going to Alton Park from about 58, 59 to be steward, Mallory Park. And then, apart from going to meetings every weekend, upstairs in the attic where we lived, Dad had this tea chest full of black and white photographs of his career, which still got, which is stunning to go through. I mean, the folk had just some of those images from the 20s right through to the 50s are just amazing. And I ought to have them in an album, really, so folk could see them. And then in addition, Colin Appleyard worked for Jefferies from 1950 to 1970, and he'd ridden solo. He'd ridden the Clubman's TT in 56, crashed on my dad's back triumph. He rode the Manx Grand Prix 58, 59 on a 7R. And then he turned to sidecar racing and the Triumph Engines outfit. And I used to be desperate to go to watch him race. And I was so desperate to, there's no room in the van, he'd be saying, no, I want to go. This is, I'm 8, 9, 10 years old. No, I want to go. You have to lie on the sidecar then. And I'd go to Mallory lying on the sidecar in the back of the van, like next to the primary chain and clutch. Got to know the innards of a Triumph engine quite well, actually.
Lay down. Watch.
I used to lay down, look at the engine. It's the smell. Nothing beats the smell of a race bike in the back of a van. I don't know what it is. And if there's anyone listening to this, if they're not nodding their head, they haven't got into the back of a van after a race bike has been raced. Maybe not so much nowadays on modern oils, but if it had been running on Castrol R, it had a certain aroma. Absolutely. Which will live with me forever. And I don't know why it was always, when you got back into your van on the Isle of Man boat, with the race bikes that had been raced, and you shoved them in the back of the van, got onto the Isle of Man boat, and got back out of the van at Liverpool or Heysham, the van had an extraordinary strong smell of the race bikes. I've always noticed that. So this special aroma the affection of the aroma came from lying on the sidecar, going to Mallory Park to watch Colin Appleyard and his passenger, Viv Sheriffs, I think, that's what they call him, racing. And some of those meetings were big. The Sidecar Race of the Year at Mallory Park had all the big stars from Europe, Max Deubel, Fritz Scheidegger, Florian Prometheus, Heinz Luthringhauser, Otto Colley, all these top foreigners on top of Chris Vincent, Pip Harris, Bill Boddice, Charlie Freeman, and folk like that. I've missed a few out. Peter Kilty was another Northern star. And all these star racers charging around. Owen Greenwood on a Hillman engined three-wheeler. He was pretty good, Owen Greenwood. So all these guys charging around Mallory Park. So I was quite into sidecar racing then. I followed the sidecars quite closely.
Yeah.
I mean, on top of all that, our hero was Alan Shepard, because Alan Shepard, who, lots of famous things about Alan Shepard, he worked with my dad in 1956.
Right.
He came from Grange Sands and used to ride, which has got to be 65, 70 miles. He came from Grange Sands to Shipley every day to work on International Norton. And I can still picture him coming up the street, no lights on the bike, International Norton, registration across the front plate, and leaning it against the wall, no stand on the bike, leant it against the wall, and I just look at this bike, aged 4 or 5 years old, just gawping at this, what effectively is a race bike on the road. And Alan Shepard worked for Dad. But the reason he went to work for in Horsforth, Leeds, with Bill Bancroft was because Bill Bancroft offered him good bikes for the Manx, and he went and won the 58 Junior Manx on the 7R. And I think he set the fastest lap in the senior, but retired for some reason, and I don't know why. I have to look that up. On top of all that, upstairs are bound volumes of the Motorcycle magazine.
Yeah.
Bound volumes, 1933 to 1942, plus a few more after that, plus every loose copy from 46 to 67, plus a few original ones, including Volume 1, Number 1 of the Motorcycle, 31st of March, 1903. I've got that upstairs. I've got Volume 1, Number 1 upstairs. So I might go on the repair shop or whatever. Antiques Roadshow, I mean.
Antiques Roadshow
and say, how much? See what Fiona Bruce thinks to that.
So have some of that. That's what you want. Have some of that, love. And there's plenty more where that came from as well.
On the front page, there's adverts for BAT and Vindec and Peugeot. Well, you've heard of Peugeot, but they made bikes. And I don't think there was any Nortons about then. It was pre-Norton and pre-BSA, I think it might be pre-Triumph.
So you couldn't help but be inspired, could you?
So I had all these as a kid growing up, correct? And we messed about, my brother and I, we messed about at the shop. There's a quarry at the back, which was called the Silver Delph. I bet nobody knows listening knew that field, which is now a field, at the back of the shop was called the Silver Delph, or the Delph. But we played as a quarry, bug-ridden quarry, rats infested. We must have been immunised from the age 4. And then one day in July 59, I stood at the top of the street and my brother is actually riding a motorbike. And I'm looking at him. I can't believe my eyes. He'd be 11 just. And I stand there crying my eyes out. And he says, what's wrong? What's wrong? I said, I want to ride. You'll hurt yourself. You're too small. No, I'm going to ride. So he says, here, have a go then. Thinking he'll be off. He'll fall off, hurt himself, and he won't want to ride again. But I got on and rode it. I got on and rode it at 7. I was 7. I got on and rode this dandy, 2-speed dandies. They had a second gear select like a scooter.
Yeah.
You don't know what a BSA dandy is, I'm sure. Do you?
No, I understand the
oh, right, yeah, I understand the gear change, yeah. 75cc. Anyway, off I went and rode it all right. I rode it no problem. So from that point onwards, he was a bit fed up with Tony that I rode it. But no, jokingly. But we rode together on the quarry from 59 through to it being filled in 68, I think. And it was a great training area for the trials career later. And for my brother. I mean, he was a very good trials rider. As I said, finished a Scott. And he would have been a good scrambler if he bothered with that. He'd be good at anything. And what he was very good at was car rallying. More stories about that later. Because some of his car rallying stories, despite the fact is he had hand paralysed, no use of legs, hand change, hand clutch, hand everything, hand throttle, hand brake, and everything, and he still managed to drive a rally car. He would have been, if he'd been able-bodied, he would have, if he'd chosen, would have been a super car rally driver. So we rode these off-road bikes. Famous, we had you won't know what a T15 Terrier is, Triumph Terrier. But you've heard of a Tiger Cub?
Of course.
Well, the Tiger Cub came out in end of 53, but the Terrier was the year earlier. The T15 150cc Terrier in Amaryllis Red, which is the same colour as a Speed Twin. This Cub came out in end of 53, 200cc, in the silver, the same colour as a Tiger 100. So the 150 was the Terrier. That was still produced till about 58, and they dropped it. But we had a Terrier. Somehow we managed to find an old wreck of a Terrier and got it going. VNW 190. I don't think it's around now. And we charged round the quarry on this Terrier. Brother, being 4 years older, was far more able and able to slide it and stuff like that. And he learnt feet up slides. And I'm sure if that didn't help his racing career, I don't know what, because Tony and David were absolutely brilliant in wet, dry conditions. I wasn't. I was fairly good in very wet conditions. If it was absolutely lashing down, puddles everywhere, I won the Ulster Grand Prix, the Superstock race of the Ulster. It was typical Irish weather, and it was pouring down. It really was. Didn't have full wet, but I won the race from Steve Hislop. There wasn't as though there's nobody behind me. But Tony, where Tony was brilliant, and David, wet patches, I couldn't abide them. I was never good on wet patches. Ended up in a big crash in the Isle of Man on a wet patch on a drying race. So that was never my strong point, was dry, wet conditions. But Tony, as a result of probably feet up slides on the quarry, was just absolutely... And he won there were famous race round Brands Hatch. They ran it the wrong way around.
Oh, what's it called?
What was it called?
The something 100.
Yeah, Hutchinson 100.
Hutchinson 100.
Thank you. I can't believe I've forgotten that. He cleared off. I mean, with Tony to be sitting here now nodding his head, he cleared off from the likes of John Cooper, Paul Smart, Ray Pickrell, Bob Heath, all the stars of the day. And if I've missed anyone out, I apologise. Might have been Mick Grant.
I think he did do
Peter
that.
Williams. Yeah. Sorry, all those stars. And Tony, it was wet, dry conditions, and he just cleared off. And it was half a lap ahead. Just played with the crowd. And it was just ridiculous how easily he won that race on a Triumph 3. And those Triumph 3s, didn't it sound good? Have you heard a proper works Triumph 3? When they had him, first time I heard him at a TT in 71, the year Tony won the first Formula 750 race, they came howling past the start. I was there with my leg in plaster watching, and Percy Tate, Ray Pickrell and Tony had the works bikes. And compared to an ordinary Trident, they just revved about 1,000 RPM more, about 9,000. And I just had a different camshaft. I don't know what it was. They just sounded as good as, not quite a Honda 6, not quite Agostini's MV3, but they sounded fantastic as they came booming down the Glencrutchery Road. So those Triumph 3s, when they run when Tony was in the transatlantic team, the British team to face America, well, they were all on Triumph 3s and BSA 3s. And 71, they were all race 3s. There were nothing but BSA 3s. After that, there was Mitch and Match and Carl Raybon on Harley Davidsons and other bikes available, Peter Williamson and Norton. But the first year, 71, they were all on BSA Triumph 3 cylinders. Must have sounded, I wasn't there, but they must have sounded fantastic. Certainly heard them at the TT and just couldn't believe how good they sounded. And it really, there's no doubt, sound for racing is atmospheric, isn't it?
Of course.
The start of a race it sends a shiver down your spine.
You mentioned the Castrol R and the two strokes. As I came into racing as a boy in the very late 70s at Cadwell Park with Granty and Reg and Barry
The big
Sheen.
TZ 700s and RG 500s.
Or RG 500s,
they're just
exactly that.
Fantastic.
So as everybody set off, and being on the banking as a kid and that blue haze that they leave behind.
Yeah.
And it is, I know for a fact that there will be listeners and viewers listening to this and watching this now.
Nodding their head.
That will, exactly.
I've
that
been
will
there.
nod their head.
That's why I go to race meetings.
That's why we went racing.
I remember the last I walked out with for a while, and she suddenly mentioned Speedway. I said, "Oh, I've been to Speedway." Says, "I only went for the smell."
Right.
So what was it, that oil they use? Castrol R. Oh, was it? Castrol R, yeah. She'd not heard of Castrol R, but says, just had the most amazing aroma. Says, I thought it gave some atmosphere to the event.
And it does.
I'm not massively into Speedway, though we have a family connection with Speedway in the name of John Whittaker, who was for years an FIM official and a referee for big Speedway. He knew all the big Speedway riders, Barry Briggs, who I know quite well, Ivan Major and all that lot. He was around. Eric Bucock is our local hero. And, of course, they all race on Castrol R. And I've only been to watch a few times, but it's the smell that gets you.
It absolutely it is. As our listeners and viewers know, I have a big affinity to Speedway. I enjoy going down to the Bellevue Aces at Manchester, and my granddad's ashes were spread at Quibble Park at Scunthorpe.
Oh, well, my dad...
He was big into Speedway.
Yes. Well, that's Pete Boast's big into that, isn't he?
Boasty as well, yeah.
Boasty, I know Boasty.
Great fella.
But my dad started in amongst trials riding in the late 20s. You won't have heard of Frank Berry, have you?
No.
Well, he was the manager of Sheffield Speedway.
Okay.
But he rode for Bellevue, and it was England Speedway star in the 30s. His nickname was El Diablo Rojo. Can't pronounce Spanish. The Red Devil.
Red Devil.
Him and my dad would get a boat to Buenos Aires every winter to race Speedway in Argentina. Honestly.
A boat to Buenos Aires?
Yeah, there's no plane there. I didn't have planes.
That's a long way down.
6 weeks. 6 weeks to Buenos Aires.
Wow.
And Dad raced, he was mechanic for Frank Berry.
Yeah.
They've got his Speedway Scott at Sammy's Museum.
Okay.
They had it now as Frank Charles's bike, but it's actually Frank Berry's bike. He was a local lad, Berry. He used to ride local trials.
Yeah.
Berry's a big name if you Google Frank Berry, it comes up. I did it last weekend. El Diablo Rojo is his nickname. Fabulous. The Red Devil. He rode his Scott, a two-stroke Speedway bike.
Yes.
But with a red sweater. And the Spanish blood of the South Americans, they loved it. The sound of the bike. You can imagine the sound of a two-speed Speedway Scott compared to a flat twin Douglas, a Douglas and a Rudge. They'll sound a bit pathetic four-strokes compared. A howling Scott, a yowling Scott. Well, he made a big name, did Scott. You can't believe this is 1929, when he did Speedway in England. He was on 3 nights a week, and he was on £100 a night. Dad got 10%. So Dad was on £10 3 nights a week, £30 a week to mechanic for Vary, when the working wage in the UK was £2.50, £2.10 shillings. He was on £30 a week.
Incredible.
And that got him through the recession, the huge depression in Britain. Speedway got my dad through the money he earned from that, because all companies were virtually bankrupt in the early 30s from the Great Depression. But Vary was earning a fortune, and he never married. He was a very wealthy man at the end of his days. Oh, when Uncle Frank, he was like an uncle to us, when he came to the house with Uncle Frank, he'd come with sweets for my brother and me and all that. He was a very, very popular visitor, was Frank Vary. So
in terms of growing up, it was almost sort of the perfect childhood and the perfect storm, wasn't it, to propel you and Tony into competitive trials and road racing? I'm
given to understand that if a man says to his mum, when I grow up I want to ride motorbikes, the mother will say, well, make your choice, because you can't do both. You don't really grow up, do you?
Can write that down. I love that.
You like that?
Yeah, I'm having that one. Yeah, absolutely. I'll credit you for that one.
Yeah. Well, I'm pinching it off Facebook. I'm pinching it off Facebook. I hold my hand up. Don't worry. I'm cribbing that. But yeah, make your mind up. You can't do both.
You can't do both.
You'll never really. I mean, Sammy Miller at 91. He's dancing up and down the steps because he's kept his interest in motorbikes. I believe motorbikes should be on the national health. They're that good for you. They're that good for you in terms of as long as you stay on board and don't jump off as often as I have done. Because Manx Hedges tended to win when I jumped off. As Guy Martin's father will tell you.
As usually most of the TT course is.
We've lost a family member there. There'll be a lot of people who say, yeah, I remember so-and-so. My first year racing in the Isle of Man was 75. The production TT, as I've mentioned, sadly, Paget's lost Peter McKinley at Milntown. And I remember coming round and seeing the poor lad lying there. And that's not the first time I've seen lads who have perished, sadly, in the Isle of Man. But they wouldn't have stopped if it had been somebody else. They wouldn't have stopped riding. I mean, I would not want... If the TT survives, I hope it does, for another 100 years, then I can tell you now, not one of the people that have perished would want it banning. David Jefferies included.
Indeed. I've always had the opinion that the lads and lasses that have done the TT all do it because they want to, not because they have to.
Well, it all changed a bit when Gilberto Pallotti was killed in 72 when it was a World Championship event. Prior to that, you would argue that some would be doing it because it was World Championship points. It wasn't a World Championship until 49. So the TT ran from 07 to 30 to 48 without anyone having to ride, as in vis-a-vis World Championship points.
Yes.
And famously in 57, Libero Liberati won the 500 world title that year from Bob McIntyre. He didn't do the TT.
Right. I forget it was part of the World Championship up to
76 was the last year it counted, Yeah, so you could argue...
76, you do it because you want to, not because you have to.
Absolutely,
It's an important...
I can tell you now, Dave, when it was coming up to a TT or the Manx, I was looking forward to it so much. I wasn't, dreading it. I was dreading having to, I haven't got my bike ready yet. That was panic. You haven't got the bikes ready, sometimes 4 or 5 bikes.
Yeah.
Panic station set in because they're not ready. But I can tell you now, I was aching to get on the first practice and get down. Nervous, yes, but aching to ride. I could not wait to get on that bike. And the most incredible feeling as you set off, morning practice, which is long gone, 5:15 they close the roads, 5:20 there's probably started in TT, 6:20 for the Manx later in the year. But at 5:20 the odd street light's still on. You know, there's nobody about. It's eerily cold and still and weird. As you think, am I? And you set off to get a pat on the back. Off you go down Grey Hill. Am I really doing this? Is this for real? You know, it's a bit of a... I was in bed about an hour ago. And I'm actually racing down to Quarter Bridge. And as long as the bike kept going, because the last thing you wanted to do was retire at the far side of the course or on the mountain, because you'd freeze your nuts off up there, just in thin. Like before we had back protectors and loads of gear on, we had just a thin set of leathers and nothing else. And you'd be getting very cold on the mountain if you packed up. But if you can get 2 laps in, get back, and of course, famously in the 30s, 40s, 50s, there was the Cadbury tent, which was hot chocolate or cocoa. And I think they still had that when I first started in 75. Did your morning practice, 2 laps into the cocoa tent. And it's not like that now because there's no blooming morning practice.
No, none whatsoever.
You can argue modern bikes are reliable. They've got videos they can play to learn the course. When I first I'd ridden around the course many times. When I first raced there, I went on my Norton, which hadn't been pulled in bits to make up for Ian Martin's demise. And I went to Ballacrane, and I learnt the course from Ballacrane to Cronky, turned around, went back down to Ballacrane, turned around, went up and down there all morning. When I came to actually do the practice, which was curtailed because of Ian Martin's crash, and when I got to Ballacrane, I knew that as well as anybody. I knew that was a TT course that I knew. Everything else was a bit iffy, a little bit from, for instance, Sulby Bridge through to Ramsey.
Yes.
Folk who are listening now, they can do that with their eyes closed. Sulby, Gingerall, Kerrowmore, onto Glentrammon through Sky Hill towards Milntown, Glen Aldlin, Little Right-Hand Kink, down to Schoolhouse, left-hand which has been widened into Parliament Square. I can do that with my eyes closed, but I couldn't then.
No.
Especially in the morning with the sun straight in your eyes. There's a famous, how many folk listening will remember the sign as you left Kirkmichael was a great big orange sign with white writing. Or was it a white sign? No, it was an orange sign. And it said, and folk will be saying it out loud, now, beware sun next 9 miles as you came out of Kirkmichael.
Incredible.
So that was I don't think they have a sign there now.
No, they don't. No, but to learn that point from to be able to get is literally what you had to do. You had to physically go and learn the course.
I have, as folk will be gathering, quite a good retentive memory. Colin Appiah once jokingly said, "You've got a book to prove, haven't you?" And I had these TT books, and I learnt every TT winner, every fastest lap, the speed they had as well. I could do second and third on most years. I can't do as many nowadays, by the way, in case you test me, but I can do a lot of them. And I knew every TT winner. And so we've had a quiz with Neal Tuxworth, Mick Boddice, Charlie Williams, Elwyn Roberts and myself on a TT quiz panel. I don't think there's hardly a fact about the TT that those 5 wouldn't know.
Not at all. We've had Charlie Williams on the show as well. We've been over to Cheshire and sat down with
friend of mine.
Charlie.
We jointly host alternate on hosting the TT Riders Luncheon.
Yes.
November. Charlie did it this year. I did it the year before. But we alternate. And it's absolute pleasure to have. We had some pretty good riders there. Hutchie, I need to get Hutchie there this year. Local lad. I know Hutchie pretty well.
Before we get on to the road racing,
David Todd was there. I was going to say David Todd was there last year,
and David DT, lovely fellow, but all the time in the world
great guy.
for DT. Yeah. Tell me about the TT Riders Association, because I think there's a lot goes on with the TTRA that a lot of people don't know about.
Well, I'm on the committee now. I've just been elected to the committee. I'm a past president from about 20 years ago.
Steve Placer president?
Yes.
At the moment?
Yeah. No.
Oh, last year?
No.
When was? Or did he not?
Rex Butcher. Sorry about that. Edit. Rex Butcher is the new president. Very good short circuit rider in the 60s, and rode a TT. Loved the TT. Didn't have TT wins, but nonetheless enjoyed it. And he is our president. We sadly had to go along to Tommy Robb's funeral recently. 90 years old. He was 90 in October. We all went to Bangor in North Wales for Tommy's funeral. Charlie was there. Bill Smith was there, who was just turned 90 as well.
Good grief.
And lots of TT riders were there. And I always feel if a president goes, the fellow president should support the funeral and be there to support the family, show that his life mattered. And Tommy Robb, I remember watching Tommy win the 73 lightweight race on a Wednesday morning, because I'd gone over to watch my brother race, which would be his penultimate TT ever. He would have raced a senior on a Friday, but he finished third behind Peter Williams and that bloke Grant on his own home-built Trident, and Charlie Williams was less than a second behind in 4th place. That was a Formula 750 race.
Incredible.
73, but Tommy Robb won in the morning. So, and I did ride for Tommy at the British Grand Prix when they had a Triumph Speed Triple race, early 90s. So David rode for Alan Jefferies,
yes,
and I rode for Tommy Robb. And I loved it. I gave Nat Robb, Tommy's daughter, a very nice picture of Tommy and I at the British Grand Prix, stood together next to the bike.
How wonderful.
So how's that?
I'd heard over the years that there's various stories come out about the TTRA. It's not widely publicised, the help that the TTRA give to riders and
it isn't
families.
on purpose, nearly. And I think that might be to stop folk jumping on the bandwagon. Committee meetings. I went to them. I attended them 20 years ago as vice president, president, and immediate past president. But I haven't attended for 20 years. But I attended this year as a newly elected committee member. Neal Tuxworth is amongst them. Dave Mansden-Migdal.
No, Dave's been on the show as well.
Yeah, well, he's just had a bit of a health scare, as Dave.
Oh, bless him.
You know that. Yeah, I'll talk about that. Probably not the place to talk about it. But if you're listening, Dave, I hope you get well soon, mate.
Me too. Lovely
and best wishes to Jill. But anyway, he's on the committee, and a few others. Obviously, Rex Butcher, the president, is there. Frances Thorpe, whose late husband Tom Thorpe, famous rider in the late 50s, early 60s, she is now a patron, as was Murray Walker in the past.
Okay.
But we discuss folk who are eligible to be claimed for help from the TTR Association will email, will write to us, to the secretary, asking for help, and we discuss the cases on merit as to how we can distribute funds. The purpose of the luncheon is to raise funds, and they have monies available put to one side to be able to assist riders. And when not this year, but I was quite surprised 20 odd years ago some of the names that needed assistance. So nobody needs to be too ashamed to say, look, I'm sorry, I might have been silver replica winner in 1961, but I'm in dire need of help now. Or they're injured, not necessarily at the TT, and I'm sorry, no money coming in, need help. And those names remain completely anonymous.
Absolutely.
They remain within the committee. But I can tell you now, I promise you, the TT Riders Association is a very worthwhile association. And it's something my father, although he actually wasn't a member, can you believe?
Really?
Because they wouldn't let him be a member, even though he spoke at the lunch for years. He was him and Graham Walker, Murray's father, and Jeff Duke and Surtees and people like that spoke at the TTRA luncheon, which was then in London at the Connaught Rooms in those days, in the 50s, 60s. It's been around since 51, the TTRA. And some famous names as presidents, Freddie Frith, Harold Daniel, Surtees, Duke, pretty sure Hale would have read, Charlie Williams, Luigi Taveri,
Good grief.
Rod Coleman from New Zealand, who won the 54 junior TT on an AGS. Right up to modern day, Malcolm Wheeler. I'm sure he watched this. Malcolm Wheeler. Jack Wood, who was clerk of the course for years, lost him 12 months ago exactly. Jack Wood was president. I did want Colin Appleyard to become president, but Colin, I can say that now, he's passed on, but he declined it, and I think Colin would have been a fantastic president. He said he wasn't worthy alongside some of the champions, but what Colin had done for racing, I think, qualified him to be a senior position in the TTRA, and he'd ridden the TT.
Yes.
But Dad had not. He'd only ridden the Clubman's TT, and he only rode as a reserve in 34.
Okay.
And he rode the Manx Grand Prix in 33. So he actually hadn't qualified. The Clubman's TT was a bit like the production TT.
Yeah.
But without the stars. So McCallum couldn't ride it in my day. David Jefferies couldn't ride it. And but the lads who'd been at the Manx, they could ride it. So it was a Clubman for non-professional riders.
Yes.
Well, Dad had been a professional rider, but not on a race bike.
But not on the race bike. Although it was just important to tell the story of the TTRA because it's not something...
Thank you for raising that. Yeah, I'm delighted to be able to promote the TTRA. And there'll be another luncheon late November at the National Motorcycle Museum. And every year we get... I know we used to get 500 at its peak, but it's getting towards 300 still. It's a pretty good turnout for a luncheon.
Turnout. I know when we're at the TT, there's always collection pots and buckets for the TTRAs, and it's nice to hear the story. I know a couple of stories that are not for sharing on. Yeah. On the
and there's a big
domain.
auction. Bonhams come along.
Yes.
And give their services, and the auction. I mean, there was Peter Hickman's the actual fairing that Peter Hickman had on the bike when he crashed at Ginger Hall. Yes, they did. Okay, and that fairing was there. And I'm thinking, well, as most folk were thinking of in a garage, you've got your wrecked fairing for when you fell off at Cadwell, that sort of thing. And I think, yeah, well, it's worth about nothing. Maybe. I'd rather not lose it because I remember having that fairing. But
that's right. It's
worth nothing.
Personally important.
I think and there's a guy I know, a lad, I just spit his name out in a minute. He got his eyes on it. He said, I've got a grand lined up. I thought, Jesus, a grand? Yeah. You've got a grand lined up for that? And I think, look, I'll tell you this now, there's a reserve on it for £500 that I do know. I maybe shouldn't tell you that, but there's a reserve. Oh, it says, right, well, I've got a grand lined up to give that for that. It fetched 3,000, that fairing, if not more.
It's when you get the right items in the right place. We did an auction in the end of 22 to raise money for Chrissy Rouse's family.
Yep.
We did it at Brands Hatch on the Saturday night. There were no end of items that came in, but the price that they went for, because it was to such a beloved cause, because Chrissy was such a rider in the paddock, and to help mum and dad and the two sisters, we raised £90,000. £90,000 on the night, and
mind blown.
It is just as a comparison. Like I say, bits of crash fairing, front fenders, huggers, anything. But they were going for incredible money because the cause was worthy in the same way that the TTRA is. That was my point.
I can always remember people when I was racing, that people would be, "Oh, Nick, can I have your knee sliders?" Not that I got my knee down very often, but tyres and knee sliders, worn out tyres, completely knackered, but burnt up blue and completely ragged.
Yeah, so I've got knee sliders at home. I've got signed programs still because although I'm privileged to do this, still a massive fan of the sport.
Oh God! Well, it's just. I mean, I don't get to many race meetings these days. I'm not a big lover of big crowds.
Fair enough.
I'm just not. I mean, trials very rarely had big crowds, and I'm not used to big crowds at TT. I cope with it in the day, but I'm not a big lover. No. And when we all had we were all out at various buildings, houses around Douglas. I had to get back to the start for practice. Now they're all in the paddock.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, they just wheel a bike up for scrutineering. Piece of cake, but they live in motorhomes in the paddock. Different world. We were out at hotels and bikes were in the garage. We were down there between not Brandish. Come on, Jefferies. Bedstead and the Nook. We garaged there with the Harding family for years. But if the road closed, you're knackered. So we had to get the bikes ready, be out of there because roads were closed at somewhere around 5. So we had to be last minute dash, threw the bikes in the van, and then drove down to the paddock. And that was just a nightmare because the normal Douglas traffic was building up.
Yes.
You couldn't get down Victoria Road by the Governor's Bridge. It was just solid traffic. And it was just a nightmare getting to get into what was where the paddock is now, was a green field.
Yes, indeed.
Which I think was owned by the Scouts Association. So it couldn't be anything else but a green field for years. That obviously that's past now. It's no longer a green field. But to get into that field and unload your bike and then push it up to a tent before they built the scrutineering bays were tents. You pushed your bike through a tent and scrutineering up onto a ramp. Happy days.
Absolutely incredible.
So the world's changed a lot. But thank you for mentioning the TTR Association.
You're very welcome.
It means a lot to me.
Thank you. No, and that wasn't even precursed, was it? That you weren't expecting that.
I had the great privilege when I was president of being listened to by the great Murray Walker. And there's very few bigger TT enthusiasts than Murray. I mean, he loved the TT. You know his father won the TT, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
And they did the old LP recordings, didn't they?
Yes.
With Graham and Murray.
I've got them there, Stanley Schofield recordings. Yeah, they're there in the corner. Got them as a DVD set.
I think that's part of what makes the TT what it is. For me, in my younger days, I didn't get to the TT until 2018.
Oh, really?
That was my first year.
Wow.
But prior to that, everything was Manx radio.
Yep.
So listening all the time. And a lot of our listeners have this, and it's something that I'm really, really keen on, is the audio listeners to our show will, every single one who listens, pictures us in a completely different place. We could describe it to them, but everybody would have a different
picture. They got their own mind, how the mind works.
And that was the beauty of listening to the TT, whether it's from Glen Helen to Ramsey Hairpin to the bungalow, back to the grandstand. Even now, I would prefer to listen to it than watch it if I'm not there.
I have a big of a grouse with the TT organisers now. This numbering thing, 1 to 20 are seeded, but 21 onwards they qualify it. Ridiculous that they have qualifying in practice for the TT, but they have this qualifying. So if you're watching the race, forget the first 20; they're seeded, so you understand where they are. So if 10 and 11 come around together, 11 has caught 10 seconds.
Absolutely.
But after number 20, if 32 comes round with 27, 32 has not necessarily gained on 27. You've no bloody idea where they are. The only way you can tell what's happening is by looking at your iPhone. And what you're doing, if you're looking at your iPhone, you're not watching the racing. And I think it's a crime. It's an absolute crime. By all means, a rider who's got number... I mean, you saw a picture of me on an RG 500. I won the Manx in 83. And the year at the TT, first year at TT, they gave me number 80 for the senior TT, number 80. You've seen the picture.
Indeed.
I finished 7th in the race. So I passed a lot of riders. I never bothered. Just because they're going a bit faster nowadays, we weren't going slow.
No.
And RG was still doing 160 nearly.
Well, it was all relative to the time.
Well, relative to the time.
Yeah. I've always believed that.
There's a lot less riders anyway now. I mean, I was number 80. I wasn't last man off. There was number 100 behind me. Right? Two starting in pairs. So 79 went with 80.
Incredible.
Okay.
40, 20 minutes. They're going to be Ramsey by the time you leave.
Oh, aye. Yeah, definitely. Oh, we've had nearer misses than that. We've had Adam at Craignabar.
Really?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah. But the fields are much smaller now.
Yes.
But this qualifying, I think a rider, I really strongly about this, and that's why I don't want to get too involved with it because I start saying the wrong thing. But if you go to TT and you're trying to qualify to get a earlier number, I wouldn't be bothered. Get your bike right. Get yourself right. Get the weather conditions right. So you're trying to qualify when the weather might not be right, your gearing might not be right, the handling might not be right, the bike might not be right anyway, suspension, that's quite a bit of setting up.
Yeah.
You might not know your way around properly. There's 5 factors there straight away. I did try explaining that to a gentleman who was in a senior position. And he said, what do you know about it? They've all got international licenses, they know what they're doing. But it's 38 miles round. It's not Brands Hatch, 2.7 miles. So I've just sort of stood back and just let them get on with it. And of course, if I'm sorry to say, if accidents happen in practice because they're trying too hard, because they're trying to qualify a higher number, it didn't bother me back in '84 when I was number 80. I don't remember me going to the office and saying, "Excuse me, I'm lapping at 110 miles an hour, and I'm in the top 15 qualifying. I could have a higher number, could have a lower number than number 80." No, I set off on number 80. Didn't even bat an eyelid. Finished 7th. That's in the records. I can prove that.
No, absolutely. You deal with the cars you got back then.
There was an event called the Premier Classic, which was meant to be which was on the Friday. The senior was on the Monday. Finished 9th in that. I was number 73. I finished 7th in the Premier Classic, number 80.
There's still 6 laps at the senior at that point.
Yeah, 6. Yeah.
Yeah, I know if it was more.
No. It was 7 until 1959.
Right.
And it was 6. It was 1857, you know that. It was 1857. 301 miles. When Bob McIntyre did the first 100 mile an hour lap in 57, it was 8 laps to commemorate the Golden Jubilee. 8 laps. Of course. And sadly, on the 8th lap, a lad called Charlie Salt, CF Salt, on the Earls Fork BSA, crashed at Gorsley on the last lap, lost concentration, I reckon, and died. CF Salt, Charlie Salt, well-known rider at the time.
So when it came that you'd built up through the Manx GP...
I built up?
You'd built up through the Manx GP?
I was doing my first race meeting was Elvington on this TD2B I'd got.
Yeah.
And then I did Elvington, I went to Croft, Cadwell. I thought I thought it was a works rider arriving at Cadwell to race there, even though I'd watched many times in the 50s and 60s. Cadwell, proper circuit, not Elvington, round a few bollards. Croft was a full circuit, but Cadwell, I mean, I'd watched Jim Redman round the Honda 4 there, and I think I saw Reed and Sheen, MV versus Suzuki there, but that was probably about 75. Anyway, I'm racing Cadwell, I'm racing Alton Park, I'm getting my national licence. Silloth, you heard of Silloth?
Yes.
Yeah. Race at Silloth with, he's just been lost to us, Bill Simpson, Ian Simpson's father.
Simpson's dad.
Yeah. We had a great scrap in the pouring rain there.
A wonderful man.
And there was a picture of me coming and breaking down with breaking for the hairpin, and I've got this wetsuit on, and it's just the wrong thing, and I look like I've got a sail on board. And I'm this wide, and the wetsuit makes me this wide. I look like a Michelin man gone wrong. But racing in the wet at Silloth, and there's so many little holes and puddles, it was not good. But that's 50 odd years ago. I'm scared now. I'm scared. But I did this all to get qualified for the national license.
Yes.
Got my national license, which enabled me to get the One Event International to do the TT. But my real ambition was, never mind this 10-lap TT with Ian Martin, was a Brucey bonus, so I could help me learn the course for the Manx. I went to the August-September Manx Grand Prix in 75, full of ambition to sort of do quite well, really.
Yeah.
And first lap of practice, looking round to break the lap record, first lap, I crashed at Waterworks. Still got a lump in my wrist there, look.
Oh, yeah.
And I crashed at Waterworks and put the flat in the front rim. But I had two bikes. I've been TD2B, and I just bought a TZ 250. So the TD2B was to qualify on, to learn my way around, and the TZ was for the race.
Sure.
So I had to borrow the front. The TZ was all right, apart from the front wheel. So I rode back over the mountain with a flat front tyre. So the trials riders can do these things.
Of course.
When the roads reopened, I rode it back to the start. My mechanic, meantime, had gone from the start to find me at Waterworks.
Oh, no.
Well, we didn't have mobile phones.
No, of course not.
No. And I didn't know to sort of explain to the marshal I was going to make my own way back. But anyway, I don't think that went down too well with my mechanic at the time. But anyway, we got sorted out, put the wheel off the TZ, carried on qualifying. And in the Manx, in the race, I finished 6th and lapped at about 95. So I was quite pleased with that. And Alan Jackson, who went on to be Formula 2 world champion twice, I think, he won the race. But I was 6th. And that really just was, I just bloody loved it. I just thought, and still do, that riding around a TT course is the best thing you can do with your clothes on, without a doubt. And so high up the list was also riding the Scottish 6 days, riding the Manx 2 day, riding the Scot, riding the International 6 days. They were all event just fantastic when you're on it. When things are going wrong, it was the worst place you wanted to be. It was a bit like going out with a woman you didn't want to be with. It was just, get me out of here. I can't stand this. When the TT's pouring with rain and it's cold, doing a lap, when I rode the Britain in 94, the weather conditions were very dodgy, but they set us off on slicks. And by the time we got to Kirkmichael, the crowd at Kirkmichael were trying to get this race stopped before it even started because it was pouring with rain there.
So bad up there. Yeah.
We got to, I caught Steve Hislop at Ramsey Hairpin on slick tyre, both of us on slicks. He was on the RC45. I went alongside him going up to the Waterworks. He was just going this, shaking his head, as in, what the hell are we doing here? And I just shaking back. But being a trials rider, I probably thought, it's a bit like riding a Scottish really, is this? And by the time I got to the bungalow, I couldn't feel below my elbows. I couldn't feel my arms. They were just gone, frozen. It's sleet. It was just ridiculous. But I got the thing round on slicks and I came into the pits to change wheels. And whilst I was changing the wheels on the Britain, they stopped the race. It was madness. It was absolute madness. But that was I'm trying to explain that I wasn't always loving the TT. No. I hated that, of course. And I hated lying in a ditch at Lamfell when I binned it in the wet in 1990. And I vowed that my career will not finish lying in this gutter with my foot hanging off. And there was nothing left of the bike. It was Steve Parrish's, it was Terry Reimer's World Superbike machine.
Loctite Yamaha. And according, from what I never saw the bike again. There was no back end, but at the time I put it in a van, there was no back end to it at all. The back end was gone. They don't survive too well, don't bikes in the Isle of Man if they crash. They really don't.
Nor did my ankle. But it's still sore now when I talk about it. It starts to throb. But there's times when just because I loved it, like I couldn't wait to get on the bike. I didn't love it when things weren't going right or there was in sleet and snow and cold and wet and miserable. Though I always did okay in the wet and miserable conditions, as I said earlier about the Ulster. Because we used to race in the fog as well. There's no issue at all about riding in the fog. My first year, after I crashed at Waterworks, I went up the mountain mile in early morning, thick fog on my TD2B. And the next to it, there's bits of bike and damage in the road. And I came across a lad lying there, and he was unconscious. And I flagged people down. I went forward and slowed them down, and went off. I said, "Get help! Get some help!" So I waited there till the travelling marshal arrived, and then set off again with my qualifying lap. And that lad it was called Logan, I think, 75, and he had head injuries. I think he survived. But, thick fog, I didn't even know there was an accident until, never mind yellow flags. The marshal didn't know there'd been an accident.
No,
that's how things were.
The beauty of how the TT has evolved over the years is there are certain safety points.
Line
you
of
can
sight
mitigate.
marshalling nowadays.
Absolutely. Is hugely
no line of
important.
sight, no racing. The helicopter can't land, no racing. And
It's right.
in this age,
frustrating, but it's
it's still
right
wonders
thing.
of the wonders of the world that there's still a TT.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah, there is. I agree with that completely. How we still get to do that.
After the 1955 Le Mans crash, the racing could have ended for 2 wheels and 4 wheels. Full stop. That's the end of racing. Things like that happen, don't they? And
They do.
There was the big crash in the Millennium TT in 2007. There was a massive crash at Joey's, I think, the bend. It was at Joey Little Right-Hand Kink. The lad crashed into the marshals, and 2 marshals died. And poor Hilary Musselin who famously had ridden TT herself. She lost a leg.
Yes.
She was marshalling now. She lost a leg.
Wasn't she?
Sadly, she's passed on now. Gail Muslin's mother. And I knew Hilary and John Musson. And she lost a leg in that crash. So that was an awful thing that happened on the last lap of the last race of the Millennium TT. Oh, sorry, Centenary TT.
Centenary, yeah.
Centenary TT. So, things like that, we always wonder that they can see why they have to make safety and take spectators, no, you can't watch there anymore. When the bike's flying up.
But the bikes have changed.
The Bray Hill crash. The Bray Hill crash for the lad that ploughed his bike into the crowd. And most of it, no one was badly hurt.
Yeah, that's right.
They weren't so good. Mac Hobson's Bray Hill crash. Things like this over the years that have happened. You realise that it's bloody dangerous. That's no. People say to me, "Oh, don't ride motorbikes." I said, "I ride a motorbike every day. I ride a road bike still. I know it's dangerous, which is why I take extra care."
You have to be defensive about
motor car drivers are behind in tin box. That they know they're safe. They think they're safe.
Indeed.
Yeah. So we know they're not.
Not even close.
Not even close.
So take me to. I mean, this could be a whole day. Sat talking to you. We could be doing this all day. We will sort of jump back.
I might be ready to refuel and pit stop soon.
Whenever. Do you want to do that now?
Yeah.
Let's do it now.
Stop.
Was that so? When you, as the listeners and the viewers rejoin,
are we back on again
after our pit stop?
Yeah.
We'll fast forward a little bit because it pains me to do so because there are so many stories in between times. But when we moved to 88 and your first podium, how sweet was that? And what was
first TT podium. I'd been on the podium with the Manx.
Yes, you'd podium at the Manx, but the first
podium is that now a new
podium
verb?
is a
new verb.
Is a verb that we can use. The first podium was Senior Manx in '77.
Correct. That was interesting. That was an ex-Tony Rutter bike. It had been badly abused by a guy from Blackburn. I don't know who it was, but I bought it, and it was because I meant to be riding trials professionally without backtracking too much. This bike, when I finished the race, and I finished third behind the poor lad that won it, was called Snuffy Davis, Stephen Davis, and he was killed a year later at the TT. And then in '82, I was set third in the Manx, and the lad that won it was called Andy Cooper, and he was killed a year later at TT. I've got a picture of those guys on my phone, and Andy Cooper's sister is still in touch. She's in touch, and Gillian Cooper, she's still in touch and very much lives in the Isle of Man, and still very fond of the Isle of Man racing. But anyway, first podium back to '88, and that was the first year. My second year with Hondas. This brings me to this guy I was going to talk about, who was I mentioned that Sammy didn't really get the best out of me, and Sammy would disagree, I'm sure, and I didn't get the best out of myself. But this guy was my manager, was the legendary Ron Grant. That name might not be anything to you. He was in Transatlantic team in '72 and worked Suzuki's. You know the name, do you?
I know the name, absolutely.
Born in London, lived in America a lot, lived in New Zealand, did a Kiwi accent, a strange accent. What a character. And perhaps not everyone will have appreciated Ron Grant, and I can't go into any more details. Although I remember famously once, he was like to drink. He liked to drink, did Ron. And he'd work all night to get a bike. When I won the Ulster, the Superstock race, he worked all night to rebuild the bike that I totally wrecked in practice. I went straight through a hedge. I remember seeing the sign for Hansdown in front of me as I careered through the hedge and into mid-air, and then end over end, and just missed some wrought iron, all bits of wrought iron, just missed those. The bike went end over end, and it was a write-off, and Ron rebuilt it, and I won the race next day. So it was pretty chuffed. He was knackered as well, been working all night. But Ron Grant, there's some of the stories about Ron Grant just can't go onto screen for sure. But he was coming back to his hotel down from the paddock one night. I've been at a party, and outside the Castle Mona Hotel, a lot of parking. Someone has stopped. I think maybe a taxi, just letting cars out. Or they couldn't get through the gap. It wasn't a taxi. They stopped because they couldn't get through the gap. Ron's in his van. Come on, mate. Yeah, and he gets out of the van in frustration. I'll show you how to get. You jump out, mate. I'll show you how to drive through there. He says, "You've been drinking, sir. I'm a police officer."
No.
Yeah, I spent the rest of the night in jail. Oh, dear.
Oh, no.
Ron Grant was always in bother. He told me a story about once when he crashed a car and he got a broken leg in the car crash. And before the ambulance came, he reached across in agony to whip the fraudulent tax disc off the windscreen. Better to have no tax disc than a fraudulent tax disc.
Absolutely, yeah. How was he such an influence on you? How was he such... And how did the relationship come to pass?
Being on the start line. We worked together in 87.
Yeah.
3 RC30. And we had a bike called the 6X, is what Jeff Johnson rode in 86. Okay. Was a full factory F-off bit of kit.
Yeah.
Albeit not an RC30 and not anything that Joey had got, but still flat slide carbs. It was a forerunner to the RC30, a 360 crank, and it was just, it made a VFR look very, very humble and very, just a standard road bike compared to this. The 6X was a proper race bike, and I think Jeff finished second to Johnson. Jeff Johnson finished second. The late, great Jeff Johnson, I might add, a good friend of mine, and we were teammates in the Loctite Yamaha team.
Absolutely.
But Jeff finished second to Joey in 86. But he moved on to Yamaha in 87, and by complete fluke, I got the ride with Ron Grant as managing me through Bob McMillan at Honda. Because stupidly, I said to Bob, I was racing, I was still doing a TT and an RG500 and doing well top. I got fourth in the 86 production race after a good scrap with Barry Woodland. And Bob McMillan wanted to go out on the TT course with me. And I proved to be quite fast when we went on the open road. He said, you should be riding for us next year. But what I did was I suggested that I would ride a Transalp, one of my favourite bikes, in the Formula 2 TT, and I'd get it round at 100 miles an hour. And he virtually said something like, to shorten a long story, he said, anybody that thinks they can get a Transalp round a TT course at 100 miles an hour should be riding for us, but not on a Transalp. even if you think it,
you're not doing it.
This is what I was saying. Even if you think it, you should be riding for us because you're not wired right. So, but that began then a 2-year association with Honda, interrupted then by Yamaha, and then back to Honda, then an interruption with Britain, and then back to Honda. So I stayed with Honda quite a bit really over the years. Very happy years, and they looked after me very well. Didn't end particularly well, but you can't argue with how good they were to me. And I had the access to some very good bikes. But that bike I rode for Ron, it was a home-built 6X. It hadn't got flat slide carbs, but he promised me the Rothmans team were next door to where we worked, down on the prom, near the prom. And they were next door. We couldn't go in the Rothmans team with Joey's team, but we had our own little setup. And Ron, working away on his bike, he worked so hard on this bike to get the best out of it. He said, you get the thing round in under 20 minutes, I'll get you some flat slides. Anyway, I did get it around under 20 minutes, which was quite fast, by the way. Yeah, no. I wouldn't think it'd even qualify the TT under 20 minutes now, but this is, how many years ago? Is it 40 years ago nearly? Getting on towards 40 years.
Yeah, 38 years ago, yeah.
And the lap record then, in 1987, would be about 115.
Yeah.
And, under 20 minutes meant 113. So sort of, it's like Hitman's doing 136. If you can do 133, we'll get you the flat slides nearly. It was a bit like that, really.
It wasn't far off, was it?
It's all relative, isn't it?
Of course it is. I agree completely.
I mean,
nobody was trying any less hard.
One of the greatest laps of all time was Freddie Fritz lap in 1937, was the first man to lap at 90. I've got a picture of the mountain road as it was in 1990.
Like a goat track.
1937, I mean. It was a goat track, and he lapped at 90. I mean, Signpost Corner was the tightest of bends you can imagine. It was just a whole different course. So that's all that. Anyway, Ron said, get it round under 20 minutes. I didn't get the flat slides, but I went out in the race. I was number 12, and Roger Marshall was number 11. And we started together in those days. 11 and 12, 1 and 2 went together, 11 and 12 went together. And we stayed the whole race together. Roger finished 5th, and I finished 6th, because he did his short circuit bit around Governor's Bridge and was away and got over the line first. He finished 5th, I finished 6th. So Ron was just absolutely ecstatic that I finished this bike, home built. Wasn't the full factory 6X that Jeff Johnson had.
Yeah.
I nearly called him the nickname that Ron gave him. But anyway, I got it. A top 6 was absolutely fine. They were happy with that. Went out in the senior race. For those that can remember, the 87 senior was the wettest race I've ever run the senior in modern times. Only one man got round at 100 miles an hour. That was Joey on a RS 500. Nobody else lapped at 100. It was that wet. I think I averaged about 93 to finish 5th in that race. Roger finished 2nd, I think. Phil Mellor was lying 2nd to the last lap and fell off at the Nook.
Oh.
Phil Mellor on a big Suzuki.
Yeah.
He fell off at the Nook. Because I think that was open class that year. He could ride any size bike you wanted. But I think he got a big
1300.
I think he may have a big engine. I don't know.
Yeah.
Legitimately a big engine.
Yeah, of course.
I could be wrong about that. It might have been 750 limit.
Production 1300 was a class at the time.
Yeah, that was
up to
unlimited.
89.
Yes, correct. Indeed, you know that, don't you? Because I had a lap record. Anyway, I finished 5th in that. So Hondas were all very, very pleased. And the only sad thing was I'd set the fastest lap in practice in the production TT on the first of the CBR 600s, Delimols, and they never ran the race. It was abandoned. They never ran the production TT for 87 because it was so wet. They deemed that I'd have loved it. I was itching to go. Change of leathers. It was soaking from the senior.
Of course.
They ran it. They were going to run the production TT after the senior on a Saturday afternoon. It was delayed till Saturday. And I was there chattering in the back of a car trying to get warm, ready to go out. It said, the race is no more racing today. And I think most folk were very relieved. I was itching to get out.
You're ready to get out there.
Yeah. Road bike. I'll do a lot of road miles.
Yes.
No wet tyres, just road tyres. But just up my street. I'm not saying I'd have survived it.
No.
You don't know.
The fact that you wanted to go.
Oh,
exactly, yeah. That's your conditions.
Yeah. So I did that. And Ron was so chuffed with that I got an invite then to the Dutch TT to do the Formula 750 run at the Dutch TT. I was in Padgett's buying some bits. And he said, you're going to the Dutch TT, aren't you? I said, yeah, you'll need some knee sliders round there. I never had my knee down a corner. He said, yeah, if you're going to corner quickly, you've got to get your knee down. So would you believe, of all people, Peter Padgett, who is still with us, sold me a pair. So we've got these on the shelf for a tenner. So I bought some knee sliders off Peter Padgett.
Brilliant.
Had them on for the Dutch TT. And actually, you could argue, were you learning new things? Yeah, because short circuits were different to me. Proper short circuits. I'd done Silloth and Cadwell and Mallory and a few championship events at Carnaby, but not proper Formula Dutch TT, Assen, different world. And
Big
I learned to get my knee off the floor.
Bold corners.
Yeah, banked corners. It was fantastic. Unfortunately, I crashed twice in practice and I was in a very poor state, and I'm not sure I made the race, actually. I don't think I did. But it was a big experience for me. And no more frightening experience than when David Stevenson, Kevin Stevenson's father,
Yes.
my race mechanic, fell asleep on the way home back to Rotterdam. Fell asleep driving the Wayne Gardner's mobile home motorhome that we borrowed off Honda, and he fell asleep, and we all awoke with a start as the mirrors were tearing out the tarpaulin of a wagon that he was lent against. So well done, Dave. Managed to survive that.
I know Kevin very well.
That was a highlight. Well, Kevin Stevenson has been here many times when as a little boy, as a 10, 11, 12-year-old. Jacob's a boy.
Yeah.
He's a son.
Yeah.
But Kevin.
Oh, Kevin was here as a
Kevin is a 10-year-old.
Good grief.
Yeah.
Remember what we said earlier on about how tight the sport is?
Exactly. I know he's got a son, Jacob, doing very well.
Yeah, he's doing very well.
Yeah. Is it Revin, Kevin? Rev
to Race.
Rev to Race, yeah.
Yeah, Rev to Race. We'll give him a plug.
Yeah.
He's been on the show as well.
Give him a mention, yeah.
We've done
Kevin
a
Stevenson,
podcast
great
with
guy.
Kev as well.
And his dad did sterling work. I mean, he did XRAF. he did some all-nighters, did Dave Stevenson, and he met his lovely wife, Janet, who was Barry Simmons' secretary. And that's how they met, at Honda. Yeah, that's how and I was best man at the wedding back in about 1988, 89. My daughters were bridesmaids. So we'll go back a long way there. So anyway, that was memorable. So I can't remember much more about 87, apart from doing the Ball d'Or. We must mention Richard Rose, a long-time friend, and Ray Knight, the legendary journalist, who's still around at early 90s.
Brilliant.
And he I don't think he'll mind his racing license. You couldn't race an international event over the age of 55.
Oh.
Ray was 57 that year. So it must have been 87. He born 1930. So he'll be 95 this year. Still going strong. And shall we say, it was a bit smudged, his license. But he raced the Ball d'Or, and we got the bike qualified, Richard's GSXR 750. We got it qualified. We were the only British finisher. And I think the position of 45th rings a bell again. But we finished.
How the stars line up.
Yeah. 24 hours around there is bloody long way with 3 riders. With Janet Stevenson, she was Janet Webb then, Janet Stevenson keeping us awake for the 24 hours, doing sterling service. It was a great experience. I'll never forget the aroma of the barbecues going down the Mistral before they put chicanes in it. It was a long straight, was that, I can tell you.
Tell me about the doing the Ball d'Or, because that's something that maybe not too many people are aware of, that you did a bit of the endurance race.
Yeah, we did a lot of 6-hour endurance races at Snetterton.
Yeah.
Because Richard was a Hertfordshire lad from Ware in Hertfordshire, and Snetterton was his local circuit. And we'd palled up somehow. He'd asked me to be in his team at a TT. I didn't know him. So will you sign, be a part of our team, Bantam Racing team? And we won it, and we won the team award with, probably with Ray Knight. And anyway, next thing, we're doing these 6-hour 2-rider endurances at Snetterton. I think we won 2 in a row. Then we didn't win the third one because I fell off at the first right-hander. Riches, is it?
Riches, yeah, turn 1.
I fell off in there and put it in a potato field. I'm sure Barry Simmons was the secretary there at the time. I seem to remember Barry Simmons turning up, and he worked there. This would be about 85, 6.
Yeah.
Maybe pre-Honda, that was it, I suppose. I don't know. I'm sure Barry Simmons was there because he complained about the mess I'd made in his potato field. So we did quite well on the endurance event. So next thing, Richard's saying, we've got sponsorship to do the Ball d'Or in 87. We've got Ray to ride as well. Will you join us? So off we went down to Paul Ricard near Marseille, just down the road. Set up camp there, and we'd all on qualifying this bike because Richard's bike was basically a standard road bike. Now we had Christian Saron there with effectively what was becoming the OW01. It was a single arm back end super trick Yamaha before Honda sued them for using the single arm.
Oh really?
Yes, it was a single arm back end, and there was a light in the fuel tank that lit up. It looked so trick. You could see how much fuel was in the fuel tank. It was. I'm sure it lit up. It was
incredible.
Super trick. This 3OW was FZR 750R, one-off 24-hour bike. The French love their 24-hour racing, don't they?
Absolutely.
Belgian and French.
Yeah.
And this bike, the Christian Saron bike, and I came onto the Mistral, and he overtook me onto the Mistral, and I counted to 7 when he peeled off at the end of the straight. I counted 7 seconds that he took out of me just in the straight.
Just in one straight.
So we trundled round.
Yes.
Finished. We got a finisher's medal for finishing.
Yeah.
And we had a very good time. And afterwards, the post Ball d'Or party was something else, because Richard does like to party, and we did it very well. Yeah.
When you're allowed to party.
Well,
I feel these days the party side it's not quite what it should. But that's another story.
I'm not a party animal, but my dad had always told me the stories about the Scottish 6-day trials. And, you've got to join in the fun at night.
Yeah.
And the description of Alan Jefferies at the Scottish used to have the motorcycle magazines, which I've got. I could show you. Alan Jefferies, blah, 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 good on the hills, blah, 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 road steadily throughout the week, finish runner-up, life and soul of the party in the evenings.
Yeah.
And he was, and that's how he said you had to live your life. So I went to Scottish in 70, thinking that's how you had to do them. The Highland Hotel, which is the sort of HQ, and later to become the Milton Hotel, was where everyone gathered after the trial and partied. And there were a few beers. People had a few beers.
But when you
and a few late nights.
But rightly so, because when you look back, especially when you're involved with the road racing side as well, and I've had this conversation with Steve Parrish, with Granty, with all of the guys from that I grew up watching. You had to party that way. You had to live your life that way.
I know for a fact that two great riders who are no longer with us arrived at morning practice straight from the casino at the TT. They'd come straight from the casino.
Doesn't surprise me.
No, that isn't a fact. I will not give the names.
You don't need to. But that's how it was, because you never knew what was coming. Almost literally, you didn't know what was round the corner.
There was a famous Yorkshire rider called Jack Brett in the 50s. Finished runner-up, a placeman in the TT more than once. Works Norton rider, a real trier. And he'd enjoyed a drink, did Jack. He liked to drink. And I know of riders I've scrapped with around the Isle of Man, and I wouldn't be too sure that they were on 100% human fuel as against other substances.
Indeed.
I wouldn't be 100% certain on that. I think I'm very wise not to mention their names.
Without a shadow of a doubt. And I would never ask, because it's not the thing. When you got that, I guess, into you could class it as a limelight, couldn't you? If you're racing with Joey and you're racing with Izzy, you are propelled into
you're a different man. When you got to the Isle of Man, you were suddenly, I could walk down the Bradford Street and nobody would know me at all. But in the Isle of Man, nearly everyone knew you.
Yeah.
But
that's the difference between the Manx and doing the TT full.
Yeah. But I remember famously at the Northwest 200, these Irish boys come up to me, kiddies, aged 10, 11, 12, and they had 10 pictures of Nick Jefferies. And said, will you sign these? So Colin Peters, I must mention Colin Peters' name, a long friend of mine, long-time friend, and a great mechanic. And he loved this story. Because I said, right, he said, you must be real Nick Jefferies fans to want 10 of these. No, we need 10 of these to get one of Joey's. So that was my currency. I was 1/10 as popular as Joey.
1/10 of Joey.
Which probably about sums things up very nicely. Yeah.
Tell me your best memories of Joey, because I will, because of time and because of what happened, I never met Joey.
Oh, right.
I never had the privilege, because I came to this much later. But I was a great fan of his and the Dunlop family.
Well, you can't doubt Joey's ability. I don't have Joey down as the greatest TT rider ever, but I have him down as one of the great tacticians alongside Stanley Woods pre-war. A great tactician of not actually herring off in a distance. Roger Master once famously set off in a TT and didn't get past Union Mills because he burnt the clutch out on the start line. Such was his angst to get away. Joey just set off steadily and build up, and a great tactician working things out. But my memory, one particular memory, is going to Macau, and Joey had gone on his own, and I hadn't got a race mechanic with me. I'd got a wife in those days, and she was my mechanic, as it were. And we were next to each other in this multi-story car park that they'd given us at Macau to work on the bikes. We got them out the crates next to each other. I helped him put the wheels in. He did the same for me. And we worked together for a few days at Macau, and I finally learnt to understand what the hell he was talking about. Because not just like many, I hadn't a clue what he was on about. I just used to grunt and say, all right, enough, or whatever. And I finally actually, during Macau week that year, maybe about 89, 90, I did understand what he was saying.
Finally.
that was nearly needed a little badge there. I understood Joey. And Joey, famously, 1997, I got the RC45 handling quite well. There was a big problem to get to handle the RC45s. And I set them really soft, like a trials bike, really. Don't know the way I could ride them. And I crashed out big time in practice at Greeba Castle. I was out the TT week that week. And Joey borrowed my bike. He wanted to try my bike because he knew it'd been going well. And he borrowed it and raced it. He rode my bike. We just put his numbers on. And that RC45, which belongs to Dave Hodgson, he still has the fairing that Joey rode number 5 that year. He rode number 5. I think he lapped at 123 with that bike, which I feel as I would have lapped it as well on that bike, but sadly never got the chance again. But it doesn't matter, because Joey rode it and said, in Joey language, which included quite a few F words, it was the finest asked if it ever flipping written, and it was set different. It was set up differently to his, and it was a really good bike. I mean, I was so sick that I was injured, lost all my ligaments in my knee, and my knee was in plaster. I was determined to ride, but they wouldn't let me. And Joey rode it and finished. I don't think he finished. I don't think he didn't win. Philip McCallum would have won it, but Joey was well up there, maybe second or third on my bike. So we still have the bike. Dave Hodgson owns it. Still has the Joey fairing. The Joey flies on it. If anyone dare to clean that fairing with Joey's flies on,
not.
I think there'd be the hang, drawn and quartered.
That's like John McGuinness' 130 bike with the flies on it. Don't ever polish that bike. Still the same tyres.
Some of the flies on my helmet are on the back of the bike. Yeah. So these old jokes are the best, aren't they?
The old ones are the best, without a shadow of a doubt. So were you able to, and it's something I ask a lot of the guests that we have on the show, to be in the moment of the time, to understand, to be having Steve Hislop as a teammate, be on a par with Steve Hislop, Philip McCallan, Joey Dunlop, earlier with Roger Burnett, but coming in, the names that you've raced against and beaten.
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, I can honestly say that I beat Steve Hislop, I beat Charles Fogarty, I beat Philip McCallan round the TT course, but I think they beat me more often.
That's not the point. This show's about you, Nick. That's about that.
Phil Reid once said to me, famously, said to me, your problem is you enjoy it too much. Now, luckily, he told me that in 1993. He says, if you were going at the right pace, because Phil Reid was one, I think, top 6 of all-time great TT riders, as Phil Reid. And he was a fantastic rider. And he said, I wasn't enjoying it. When I was riding works Yamahas in the 60s, I wasn't enjoying it. First man to do 100-mile-an-hour lap on a 250 was Phil Reid. Famously won this 1960 senior Manx on a naked. They weren't allowed fairings in those days at the Manx. Naked bike, 1960, 98-mile-an-hour record lap on a naked Manx in 60, and no one had done 100 miles an hour on a single until 61, until 60.
Yes,
Minter first, then Hellwood, and so 98 and the Manx on a naked bike was bloody quick. That's how good Phil Reid was. He said to me, I wasn't enjoying it. You're enjoying it. You're not going fast enough. I won the TT that year.
What a fascinating thing to say.
Oh, it's absolutely true. Absolutely true. Because I got on with Phil very well. Not everyone was a fan of Phil Reid.
No.
He was one of my heroes of Phil Reid, because he rode the Gilleras. And anyone that rode Gilleras, obviously a Bob McIntyre fan, first man to lap the 100-mile-an-hour TT course on the Gillera. John Hartle, Derek Minter, and Phil Reid. Benedicto Caldarella. But not many folk listen to this remember who the hell he was.
Not at all.
An Argentinian who was second to Hellwood in the 64 Dutch TT. Benedicto Caldarella on an MV, on a Gillera.
History lesson, Nick.
Yeah, no. Caldarella was a really good rider. Didn't ride a TT. He was Argentinian champion.
I hear a lot over the guests that we have on, that when you move into factory teams, that's when the enjoyment stops for some people.
Yes,
it goes from being fun to being a job almost, and it changes people's perception of what they've got to do, whether it be World Superbikes, BSB, MotoGP, whatever. The step into a factory team changes the perception of a lot of people.
Despite Phil Reid's comments, when I was number 1 at the 88 TT and the 89 TT, I was number 1 off. When you've got Sky TV with a live, I don't know if it's a live, cameras all around you, number 1 away, and that you know that the bosses, the Japanese are there, they've come over to watch. TT was a big event for the Japanese, particularly the Formula 1 because it was World Championship. When you've got them there watching and the cameras all around you, and you're gulping a bit. I mean, honestly, I could name names that people were not able to contain their toilet habit before the start of a TT, and it does things to a. You do lose a bit of weight. How's that sound? Yeah,
that's a fair point.
I can picture folk who struggled a bit with their personal habits before the start. You were very nervous.
Of course.
There was nothing. If I actually watch videos now, and they're all warming up on the start line, maybe not so much modern ones. It all seems a bit more civilized. But the older bikes, getting the bikes going, the Nortons, the rotary Nortons, getting them fired up. The Britain getting that thing fired up was a Colin Peters is listening to this, he will know that that was an art that was mastered by few to get a Britain started. And I was out in New Zealand exactly 12 months ago, riding at Rapuna on my old bike, and it's still bloody hard work getting that thing started. They've all got rollers and little lawnmowers now, lawnmower machines to start them up. I bumped the Britain off down this road here.
Never.
Yeah, I had a Britain in the garage. I bumped it off down the road. The Britain experience, having that attention, the attention that Britain got in '94, which obviously there was added trauma because of what happened to Mark Farmer on the Thursday of practice week. I'll never forget that. It was just the most awful time. Everyone in tears, and it was nearly going home time. And John Britton sat me down in Ken Harding's lounge, where we garaged at between Best and the Nook, and sat me down, did John Britton, with a little, just sat like this, 2 armchairs about what we're doing. I said, well, I'm here to ride. You've come across the world to ride. If you were saying we've got to stop, but I'm happy to ride. He was prepared to stop. If I said stop, he'd have said, we understand. I said, well, I'm going to ride because I've lost people before and I've carried on riding.
Well, that harks back to '89, doesn't it?
Oh, well, in that race, I set a lap record, and it was never really recorded or celebrated. Of course.
No, of course not.
Of course. I mean, I'm still see Val Henshaw occasionally today. I haven't seen Phil Mellor's widow for a long time, but Val Henshaw comes to TT Riders Luncheon often. She's at Mallory Park a lot. I still see her on Facebook, and she's still very fond of racing still. But to go through what she had to go through at the TT, and many others, there's so many folk lost. I can start naming names before it becomes a bit depressing, I suppose. And I've had to. I mean, the particularly dark one was the Friday morning of the '96 TT practice week when we lost Robert Holden down at Glen Helen, who'd been my Britain teammate.
Indeed.
And Mick Lofthouse at just before Milltown, blinded by the sun possibly. And that was a very dark morning. It was the 31st of May 1996, was my birthday the next day. We had to race the Formula One race the next day. And it was tough times to sort of regroup and go out and ride. I dare say, rider deaths in Alabama, people seem to be able to carry on, but other sports, you can imagine the mass pullings out and in tribute to so-and-so, this event won't go ahead. The Isle of Man seem to carry on, really, and always have done.
How?
I don't know. That was a very dark morning, that Friday morning. And I remember seeing Robert lying there and seeing a hole in the fence where Mick had gone through the fence at Milltown, not knowing what had happened there in that case. I didn't know that both had perished until I finished practice and I got told. I went back to bed. It was morning practice, so I went back to bed in the hotel, Honda HQ, knowing we'd lost two riders I knew well. And I'd actually just banged hands with Robert as I walked past him in the morning, gone like that, just banged hands. And Mick Lofthouse had been on the radio the night before on Radio Manx TT, Manx Radio, and he'd done quite a good interview. And it was from Accrington. Part of the Accrington Mafia was Mick. We knew his dad, Arthur Lofthouse, and his brother, John, very good rider. Arthur Lofthouse was a very good customer of Keith Dixon's bike dealer in Accrington. Keith has ridden for years. And so I knew Mick Lofthouse. I said, hey, Broad Lancashire, you'll know that accent now. I said, by hell, that was a good interview last night, Mick. Said you're going to be a proper professional star, you are. He said, do you think so? Like that. And it was right chuffed. And it was perished 15 minutes later, 20 minutes later, he'd gone. And you think, how do riders cope with that? And I do not know. I don't know how they wouldn't cope nowadays. I burst into tears.
I find this one of my... I said this to Steve Plater last week. Even as a viewer at the TT, even as part of the crowd,
yes,
at the TT, when things happen, you find a lot about yourself.
Aye.
Of whether you want to go back. The first night, and the regular listeners and the viewers will know, new viewers maybe not. My first experience of the TT was on the Wednesday night of practice in 2018 when we lost Dan Neal.
Dan Neal. Oh.
We'd literally just got off the plane, Just got up to Braddon Bridge.
Yeah.
The guys and girls had gone past, and then it was red flag. And then going up to the paddock to see my friends who were working at the time, Dave Hopkinson and the guys at Danny Horn, friends of mine are I had no idea what had gone on. No idea.
Sent the riders backwards and had the Steve Mercer incident.
Exactly right.
Sent the rider the wrong way, which is an horrific
that's right. It was
boo-boo by the organisers. Oh, terrible.
With the course car, and Steve's still working hard to.
Yeah, I know. It's
some kind
making
of fitness
progress
today. He is.
Yeah.
Which is great to see. The fact he's still here is the most important thing.
Well, it is. There was a lad injured at TT who we really think would it have been kinder to slip away, and that was Dave Saville, Sidecar rider.
Sidecar, yeah.
Who crashed on a classic bike at Craignabar with a clip-on broke, I think. And the way he crashed and happened to his neck, they saved him. They jammed a drip in him and kept him alive. But you do wonder when you used to see Dave, poor lad, lovely fella, and a great sidecar driver around there. When you saw him quadriplegic, you think,
yeah, of course,
that was awful. If you go above the speed of chess, it's dangerous.
That's absolutely
People die at squash.
Yeah, they do.
They get hit on the temple with a racket.
Indeed.
Dead.
If we all didn't do things, to do something...
You can't wrap foot in cotton wool.
You should scare yourself at least once a day.
Aye. I look, well, that's it. Just with my case, it's looking
in the mirror.
In the mirror, yeah. All right. But chess, you can back from dying of boredom. Quite like chess. I've got a grandson, Ivor, he seems to be quite a talented chess player. But my daughters, Becky and Charlotte, I must mention their names because they dutifully were just youngsters through the 80s and 90s. And they said they were oblivious to the danger. If we'd realised then what we know now about how dangerous it was, we would have been petrified about your riding.
How fascinating.
We just thought, Dad goes, rides TT.
Dad does.
And if Dad's in plaster because he's fallen off, Dad's in plaster, or he's got his arm in a sling. I used to dislocate my arm quite often and broke my shoulder a lot. But that's what Dad does. Famously, he was telling Becky's husband, Andrew, about going to the Isle of Man, and said, they used to hide in the back of the van in the tyres. How old were they? I said, they were brand new. Not the tyres, the girls. So Andrew loves that story. In fact, the girls love that story. I'll put that in for their benefit, really.
Fantastic. Yeah. I love that. That's a greght story. One of the fascinating things when you look back at the late 80s, when you were riding the Yamaha.
89, 90.
Yeah.
With Andrew Smith as the boss of Yamaha, was dear friend, Andrew Smith.
But when I looked through the results, there were 7 Hondas and 1 Yamaha.
Aye. Yeah, the Yamaha that didn't handle too well.
No.
I was quite used to bikes that handled.
That took some doing.
Well, the bikes that didn't handle, my brother and I used to, Tony, so many conversations with Tony. He never got the chance to ride the TZ 700 because he crashed in 73 and it came out in 74.
Yes.
And he always said, I'd have made it handle. I said, I know you would. You made anything handle. We didn't understand it. We thought that the standard Yamahas handled well.
Yeah.
But then people had Maxton frames to make them handle better. We thought, because we'd ridden road bikes from the 60s, Tiger Triumphs with elastic frames, we'd ridden all sorts of rubbish on the roads. So it didn't worry us. Famously, the CBR 1000 jelly mould.
Yeah.
Bob McMillan said, we want you to ride the CBR 1000. It's just come out. We know it's not a race bike, but it's production TT. If you finish, say, top 12 and your lap at, say, 110, we'll be delighted. Well, I finished 6th at 113 on this jelly mould Honda. And it really didn't handle well. There's a picture of me going through Glen Aldlin, just past Milltown, and the thing's weaving from side to side down the road. But we were used to that. My brother and I were used to that sort of handling.
Yeah.
It didn't bother. The production bikes were just made for me, really. Hence, 89 production TT got a lap record on the FZR 1000. I couldn't believe how easy it was to ride. And everyone was panicking. Of course, the Gixxer 1100s were evil. Sadly, lost Phil and Steve Henshaw. Henshaw was on an FZR 1000.
Yes.
And he crashed because of what happened to Whittam. Whittam went down at Quarry.
Yeah.
Whittam went down at Quarry Bends, James Whittam.
Yes.
And Mick Seward came around the corner next, saw what was happening, put the brakes on, and Steve ran in the back of him. That's how Steve perished. But I set the lap record in at 117 something, which was deemed quite fast then. There was only one man at 120 on a proper bike, that was the Islop. So 117 was quite quick on the road bike.
117's decent.
Yeah.
And Witt never went back to the TT after that, did he? Never competed again after that.
And yet Witt was on the rostrum in the in the '88 production TT. He was on the rostrum.
Oh, he was good.
pretty quick.
He was decent.
James Whittam was quick. I was right behind James Whittam at the Ulster Grand Prix on his Suzuki, 89 Ulster. I was on the OW01. And flying into a part of the course called the Flow Bog. And anyone in Northern Ireland will know the Flow Bog, up above the quarry, at the end of the lap of the Dundrod. And he went round a long right and then a quick left for the Flow Bog. And there's a change of surface and it just drops away. Down he went. And it went in slow motion. I'm right behind him. Slow motion. It jumped the ditch that's just on the right-hand side. And he hit the other side and he broke his ankle, which was a great shame. I mean, he wasn't badly injured, but ankle was meant he couldn't ride. But I was right behind him when he did that. But he was fast up to that point. But Whittam was probably a bit like me with an enduro bike, too fast for his road bike ability, his road ability. Short circuit's fantastic, but you can't ride like that on the roads.
No.
And it would have probably, I don't know if he'd argue with that with Whit, but he did anyway. Those Gixters, they weren't great handling bikes. But I remember seeing the slow motion crash and down he went. And sadly, we were going from there to Ireland, straight to the Isle of Man, do the Tour of Man, which was road bikes on special stages and off-road bikes on off-road stages.
Oh, wow.
And there was Carl Fogarty, Hislop, John Reynolds, Terry Reimer, Ian Simpson, myself, meant to be Jeff Johnson, Eric McFarlane, and Mark Farmer. 3 riders from each manufacturer, of the 4 manufacturers, Honda, Suzuki, Yamaha, Kawasaki. If I've missed names out, I apologise. Did I mention Brian Morrison? Carl Fogarty, Hislop.
Yeah, Morrison as well,
yeah. And we all did this event. At the end of the week, effectively, it was Foggy versus me. We were leading. I was leading overall, and Foggy was getting the upper hand on the off-road sections. As I was on an XTZ 750 twin Yamaha off-road bike, and Foggy was on the Dominator, which was probably a little bit better bike. But I had the better road bike. The FZR 600 was better than the CBR 600. But he missed that event, did James? They had to bring a rider in called Paul Booler. Oh. I didn't know Paul Booler,
no.
But he rode in place of Whittam in that Tour of Man. We were all promised a lot of money to ride it, expenses, you name it. We had a fantastic week, lots of beer consumed, lots of hilarious moments, including watching Terry Reimer charging down the beach at up near Point of Ayre, doing something close to 100 miles an hour in his XTZ. They were fast. And he hit a wooden bit of debris, a bit of flotsam. He hit this flotsam.
No.
And the end, it wrote the bike off. He was all right. But the bike went end over end down the beach. And he came back that night on the back of my bike over the TT course and didn't enjoy that.
One of our most underrated riders, I feel, Terry Reimer.
Great rider was El Tel. Yeah,
super fella. Well, we've seen him a lot at BSB this year.
Still does commentary for endurance.
Yeah. And he was helping Danny Buchan this year in BSB.
All right. Which I will be watching I will be watching him over at Le Mans Bordeaux. This is bloody Eurosport. The fiasco.
Big change coming up. Yeah. Big change. Of those early, sort of late 80s, early 90s, what are your favourite memories before the Britain, before that time?
The year I won not 93. The 1990, I'd finished second to Carl Fogarty, you might have heard of him, in the 1990 Formula 1 race on the Saturday afternoon. But for some stupid bloody reason, decided to run the 400 Supersport race at 5 o'clock Saturday evening.
Wow.
Nothing like a low sun to make racing a bit safer. So I was number 7. I'd ridden the OW01, finished second. Robert Dunlop third on the Rotary Norton. Had a fantastic race, really. Carl won it fair and square. I always used to reckon second was all right. In fact, I said to Gary Pinchin once, who wrote a book, didn't he, TT book?
He did.
So better to be second than bugger all else. You know, to have retired at Windy Corner on the third lap and have not had a ride round. At least you're second, you're on the rostrum, a bit of champagne, the press want to talk to you. Why didn't you win? But whatever, you're still up there.
Press conference,
you're still up there,
isn't it? Yeah. Good for the sponsors, good for the team.
Yeah, exactly. You get to wave to folk on the rostrum. Anyway, so I'd finished second to Carl. So I've got this little FZR 400 RRSP to ride.
Beautiful
little bike.
Yeah.
And a little buzz box. And they'll do about 140 miles an hour. The OW1 did about 175, I suppose. So 130 horsepower compared to 65. So half power. So I'm looking forward to the ride, really. I was a bit knackered from the Formula 1 race. It's an hour later. We're out on these things. So, there's a cat interrupting things.
No problem.
There's that cat. There's a cat. Coco's going to feature on the.
Excellent.
Might have to stop and feed her to stop her meowing in a minute. But anyway, here's Coco. What's going on here? This is my spot.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Chasing the sunshine.
She's not purring, she's sniffing you out. Right. Will that come up? Will that be heard on the microphone?
It'll be fine, no problem. We when we were up with Whit last year, we had I had his dog on my lap.
Right.
We had Sprout,
Fantastic.
so it's fine, no
Fantastic,
problem.
Yeah. I used to have 4 dogs here. I love my dogs, but Barbara bought a cat, and I love the cat. We love the pussycat. Anyway, so there I was, ready to go out on the 400. And I remember Hislop was number 6, Foggy was number 8, Leach was number 9, Steve Kill number 5, Steve Ward number 4, I think. Forget now the rest of the numbers. But anyway, I set off and immediately thought, bloody hell, it's on 3 cylinders. It's only on 3. Oh, I've been looking forward to this ride. It's such a nice bike to ride, such an easy bike to ride. So off I got. I thought, well, it might clear. I'll keep going. Don't pull out straight away. It might chime in on 4. Went round Quarterbridge, up to Braddon Bridge, up to Union Mills, out of Union Mills, climbing up the hill. I'm sure folk know exactly what I'm talking about. Up the hill towards, they call it Ballagary now. It's always Glen Vine in my time.
Yes.
But anyway, used to have some trial sections there in the Manx 2-day trial. A bit slower. But anyway, and I thought, who's that in front? And it's Steve Hislop, none other than Steve Hislop, on a VFR 400, which were a bit slower than FZR 400s, just a fraction slower. And I thought, well, I'm catching Steve Hislop. Why he's still going? He's got his head down.
Can't be that bad.
It can't be that bad. Bloody hell, it's on. And I looked at the rev counter from 15,000 RPM in top gear to do about 16 flat out. At 15,000, I'm tucked in. I'm a big lad for 400. Far too big. I'm 2 stone more than Steve and Carl and all that lot. But I catch Stephen and go, whoa, past him like that, put my foot out, say hi. It's on 4. We've got a ride. Meanwhile, Carl Fogarty and Dave Leach catch Hizzy and drag Hizzy along. They catch me, and we catch Steve Cull. So I think there's a video of us all going into Parliament Square together, all alongside.
Fabulous.
And I finished 4th in the race. They out-dragged me, but no complaints about that at all. It was a short-circuit ride, 3-lap short-circuit race. Great fun, though. To ride the 400s round there after on the OWO1s, they'd seem slow now, wouldn't they, compared to modern bikes? But
they would, but again, I think everything's comparable.
Yeah. I thought, I'm sure Freddie Frith's Manx Norton in 37 with 45 horsepower seemed quite fast. Well, they did.
We said this with Granty. It's all relative.
Yeah.
Every year, nobody's trying any less hard.
No, you can only beat or ride what you've got.
It's exactly that.
Yeah. So we all had a fantastic ride down together, and that stands out in the memory because a few days later, I'm lying in the ditch at Lamb Fell with my foot hanging off, with a written off OWO1, and out of the race. And I didn't like not to finish because, as you can see from those replicas, you get a replica when you finish. It's always nice to get something.
And how many finishes overall?
83, I think. 83 with about 80 replicas.
From 99 starts?
Yeah. 42 years of riding. I was very...
Percentage-wise is incredible.
Well, I was very pleased to get on the rostrum age 63 in the Super Twins Manx, even though I shouldn't have been doing the Manx, really. You allowed me to do it, so I thought, well, if you give me a ride, I'd quite like the ride round, you see.
Yeah. Dave Madsen Migdal's the same now.
Yeah.
60.
Milgram Mangle is 70, I think. But they give you 8 laps round Mallory. In 6 minutes, you've done the race. Whereas it was 2 hours. Some of those winners' times there, or finishers' times, sorry, not winners. I think when I won it was 1 hour 53. Now it's about 1 hour 45, I think. But it's still about round figures, 2 hours of riding.
It's a long time.
It's a long time, isn't it? Yeah. Compared to Mallory. 10 laps around Mallory, yeah.
37 3/4 miles, 200 plus corners, 226 corners?
226 miles.
226 miles, 300 corners.
Yeah, something like that. But I obviously I like the Boulder, I like the endurance races. I like the Ulster Grand Prix long lap. Northwest I wasn't fond of, but I did it, the Northwest, because that's what we did. I wasn't as keen, but anyway, whatever. That's a monumental crash at the Northwest one year. Oh, God.
Tell me about it.
Oh, my God. That was... there was Jim Moody, Philip McCallan ahead of me, and Michael Rutter, and I was lying 4th on the RC45, and there was something cross, Mathers Cross.
Mathers Cross
was a fast right-hander in those days, 5th gear, about 140 mile an hour. And I changed down to fifth, kept the gas on, and at first lap, and it just kicked, and down I went and held on to it. And it's on the video. It's on the 96 TT video, this crash, because amateur video's seen it. Keith Ewan doing the commentary. And then down I go, and I spin up the road. And then I'm pretty knocked about, and I actually go off the road on my hands and knees and collapse in a heap. And the marshals radio in, number 15, Nick Jefferies crashed at Mother's Cross. And the boy asked him, is he okay? Yes, so I'll ask him. We'll ask him. So they asked me, and I've been knocked about. They said, what's your race number? I said, 15. Who are you? Nick Jefferies. Where have you crashed? Mother's Cross. Yeah, rider's okay. I couldn't have told you, and I've said this story many times, I got concussion because I didn't know I was doing the Ulster Grand Prix or the Northwest. I couldn't have told you how you got to Mother's Cross. I had no idea where I was. I was completely knocked about.
So how?
The marshal just radioed in. If they'd not radioed in and just asked me first, who are you? Where are you? What race are you doing? I wouldn't have had a clue. But I just heard him say it. The only thing I can think of, heard him radio in, number 15, Nick Jefferies, crashed at Mother's Cross.
So all you did was recite what
I just recited what he said.
Yeah,
rider's okay. So I did the TT a week later. I was well knocked about. I had a bad head injury as well. My head was swollen. I sadly had to speak at Steve Ward's funeral on Monday. And my head was out here, and I was unrecognisable. I went up on a walking stick because my foot was very badly gouged up. As usual, the right foot got some damage to my foot over the years. And I spoke at Steve's funeral, who'd lost his life in Sweden. And Yvonne Ward, bless her, she'll listen to this, no doubt, lovely lady, she held on to the funeral. She held it back until everyone got back from the Northwest. She'd asked me to speak, and I hobbled up to the lectern in Thorne, in South Yorkshire, where they lived, and gave the eulogy, but I was not in very good shape. But anyway, the end of that week, we're off to the TT. I managed to finish second to Philip, ahead of Michael Rutter in the Formula One race, and third behind Philip and Joey in the senior. So I was a bit knocked about, though. Wasn't in my best shape.
But still to be stood on the podium.
Oh, but as I said to Gary Pinchin, it's better that than bugger all else.
Yeah. Jesus.
But it was no laughing matter when you think of poor old Steve Ward.
No, exactly.
Steve Ward had famously, the year before, got his chance to ride the RC45 at the TT, having had many good places, and set the fastest lap of the week on Philip's bike. Because Philip went off to do a European 600 Championship, having won the Formula One race, didn't do the senior, left it to us lot to fight out. Joey won it with Ian Duffer second, Simon Beck third, and me fourth. I was a bit gutted about being fourth.
That's the difficult place to finish.
Oh, I had 4 fourths one year, 92. Yeah, I hated fourth. I had about 7 fourths altogether. Fed up with fourth. Anyway, it's still here. This was still here.
Well, that's the important thing.
But Steve Ward set the fastest lap of the week, and that's always something you could take to his grave. And I know Yvonne loves the fact to be reminded that Steve I set the fastest lap of the week and finished second to Joey. And I finished third, so it was Joey, Ian Duffers on a Dougie Holtam's Top Gun Ducati, which you couldn't over-rev it to make it survive the race. Steve Ward third and me fourth. So I always remember fondly Steve Ward. Was always a good friend for years, and we always sort of parallel careers, really.
Tell me about the win.
Oh, well, the win. My daughters were on the start line that year. I had a pretty good week, but on the Friday, going over the mountain, on the Thursday evening, was it Thursday afternoon, the bike has stopped dead, just cut out, going towards a blackout. I was alongside Mark Farmer, just past Mark Farmer, and I just passed him, and then just stopped dead. And I freewheeled into the blackout car, the lay-by there. The Stonebreakers Hut, it was called, just before veranda. And that was it. I was out. I thought, oh, God, Thursday afternoon. And a guy called Chris Pike, who's World Superbike mechanic, he had with him that week a wiring loom off a World Endurance bike, a World Endurance RC30. That's all he'd got. So he rewired this bike completely and fired it up on the Friday. And I did a lap of it on the Friday night, and it was running all right. And the race was next day. and I had no idea if it was going to last the race. But I decided, Becky, my eldest daughter, who'd be 11 that year, on the start line.
This is 93, isn't it?
93.
Castrol Honda.
Castrol Honda, the
RC30.
The second year they had Castrol Honda colours. They actually reversed the colours.
Yes.
But anyway, second year, and on the start line, she said, "Go for it, Dad." And we have a little frog in the van which has "Go for it," which was given to me by Ron Grant, which is where he got the expression, I think. Ron Grant gave me this little frog which had "Go for it" written on its tummy, and she said, "Go for it." So I thought, I bloody well will. I'm just going to go get my head down. Phil Reed says, "You enjoy it too much." I'm not going to enjoy it. I'm going to go hard as I can.
Full send.
Full send. As Ian Martin used to say, the guy's father, "Tight wire," in his Lincolnshire accent.
Huh?
Tight wire.
Tight wire?
Tight wire.
Tight wire.
So I went pretty hard lap one. And ironically, the ex-wife, Kate, had to take the girls to the airport to get back because they were at private school on Monday morning.
Oh.
So they went off to the airport, got the plane. By the time the race finished, Kate had got back. She was there to finish. But I went hard and I was second, about half a second behind Mark Farmer. And he had sprocket trouble second lap. And I went on to lead the rest of the race. Famously, Philip McCallum, if he listens to this, he thinks he should have won it. But I set a faster lap every lap bar in the fifth, sixth. But in the last lap, I was a faster lap than him. Up in just over 120 in those days. Nothing too sensational. I think the lap record, Steve Hislop. Oh, Foggy, 123.
Yeah.
Lap record. We were doing about 121.
From 92.
From 92, yeah. So we weren't slow.
Still not shabby.
No, I wasn't shabby.
I wouldn't want to try it.
There's only 3 or 4 going on 120 by then. Anyway, the pit stop, I had good pit stops. Famously, Steve Ward fell off in his second pit stop, or his first pit stop. He fell off. And but he went on to finish third. But Philip went into a change of helmet, a change of visor, sorry, and the visor wouldn't go back on again. Okay. So he changed helmets and he lost about 40 seconds, he reckons. And he reckons that was why he didn't win. But I had set it fastest lapper than him every lap bar in the last lap. So I'm not going to accept that, Philip. Sorry.
And Philip does watch.
Oh, does he?
Philip does watch and listen.
He'll be hating this, Philip. There's no more competitive person.
As does John Lofthouse.
Does Philip McCallum and Carl Fogarty are probably the two most competitive people away from Sammy Miller. As in absolutely competitive. Martin Lampkin probably. But in races, on the start line, Roger Marshall looked like he was more focused than whatever fully focused looks like. He was more fully focused than fully focused was Roger Marshall. But Foggy was very competitive. Philip, incredibly competitive. And Roger Marshall, the same. And they were obviously these lads are. If Hizzy wasn't happy, then you're going to beat Hizzy.
Yeah.
If Hizzy, the sun was shining, the bike was right, everything fit into place, you weren't going to beat Hizzy. It was the finest TT rider I ever rode against. Hizzy was, in my opinion, better than Foggy, better than Philip, better than Joey.
This was going to be my question because you said earlier on that you didn't have Joey as the greatest TT rider of all time.
But equal greatest tactician.
Yes.
Equal greatest tactician.
So in your mind, who is?
My Hislop. I'd love to know what would Freddie Fifth do against Stanley Woods, against Jeff Duke, against John Surtees. Blah. You can never.
Pub conversation. That, isn't it?
I think it's Hailwood and Hislop. And one thing that Hislop could ride 250s and 500s MotoGP. It was quick, wasn't he? He
was
Donington.
Yeah,
you could ride anything with Hislop.
Production
Ducati. Correct.
He matched Valentino, beat Valentino's time.
Famous. I mean, Hislop ran a TT course was a joy. I did a 600 lap with him one year. We got on practice. And we went round together the whole lap. But believe me, when he entered Kirkmichael, the Douglas Corner, they call it, the first right-hander there, I couldn't believe he could take out 50 to 100 yards out of me going into Kirkmichael. And it took me to Ballath Bridge to get him back. And I was absolutely flat out, tucked in, arse up, head down. I did Ben Cullen flat, probably didn't, but it felt like I did it. And Alpine, absolutely flat. And I finally got caught up with him again at Alpine to a Ballath. And afterwards he said, it just came in together at slowing down. It was a practice lap. And he said, oh, that was great fun. That was great fun because we diced a little bit as well. It was just fabulous and so natural and so easy. wasn't hard work for him. If he wanted to go faster, he could have gone faster. But so the greatest talent I saw on a TT course, but not the greatest number of wins, not the biggest fan of the TT.
No.
Bit moody. Things had to be right for him. With Foggy, he could have had square wheels. He'd have found a way to win it.
Oh, the determination, different level.
Yeah. Isn't it great that they're all different? And quietly, Brian Morrison was a wonderful TT rider behind the scenes.
And Simo as well.
Mick Simo, yeah. I remember Simo coming flying past me one year. And he had the full-on works bike for 98. That had a great bike that Simo had, and he won 2 races that year.
RC45.
He had a factory RC45. So it was a very fast bike.
Big difference between the factory bike and the customer bike.
I would say so.
As I've learned doing this over the years.
Yeah, definitely.
One thing that I find when I've done a couple of interviews with James Hillier and recently with Michael Rutter, and what you said then about riding with Hizzy. James learned more in 2/3 of a lap following Michael Dunlop, following John McGuinness, than he'd ever learned in the previous years before that.
Yeah.
Michael Rutter said the same following Joey. And you saying the same riding with Hizzy.
And Jim Moody followed me for a lap when he first went there in 1990. And he came and banged me on the shoulder afterwards and says, "Thanks a lot for that. Great lesson. Thank you." And Jim Moody went on to be, lap record holder around there. Winner, production TT win for sure. Very fast man was Moody. Particularly when the organisers had paid him what he thought it was worth. Just thought I'd put that in.
Without
quite because a Scotsman,
without
quite a high
sounding
priority.
like we're dropping names.
Yeah.
Jim watches the show as well.
Okay, well, Jim. Yeah, I'm right about that, Jim. Yeah.
And because Jim's happy in his own world, he's not. There are some riders that they don't want to come on the show with the limelight and be reminded of times. They do their own thing. And Jim's one of those, which I completely respect.
But he still charges around Scotland with Ian Duffy, Ian Simpson, Brian Morrison.
They still do their Scottish tours. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
What's your best Jim Moody story?
He told a revolting story at a dinner. We were joint guest speakers at a dinner one year, probably the Wirral 100 dinner. That's a story you can't repeat. I'm sure Jim will remember the joke. It can't be repeated on here. But it involves a lot of paper in his mouth. I know that. I remember that.
So my life's worth now with this podcast is to get as many Jim Moody stories out as we can.
I don't know as many,
because we're not going to get.
I remember Jim.
There aren't too many that can be repeated.
The race I won, the 93, he famously rode to get practice for the Supersport race. He rode a 636 overboard 600 in the Formula One race. He was probably allowed to do that. But I remember him working on the bike, thinking, "Oh, you're riding that in the Formula One race? You're going to get blown away." He finished 6th, I think, on that bike. I was feeling Trevor Nation might have been 5th on an ex-Foggy OW01.
On the OW01, yeah.
I think so. It was Pete Beale's bike. Got to mention Pete Beale, because I know he's not had an easy time of late, so I hope you're okay, Pete. But I remember Jim Moody there. And also, is that all right?
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, no problem.
I can picture Jim Moody first time he was at Cadwell Park. He had Mad Dog on the back of his helmet, didn't he?
Jim Mad Dog Moody.
Was it Mad Dog Moody? Yeah. And we were all laughing at him at Cadwell Park because he'd come a long way to ride there. And he's on the start, waiting to go out the gate onto the track at the top of the mountain there. He used to join the track there before the whole bends.
Right. Yeah, from the top paddock.
And he's waiting to go. We all think, listen, who's that bloody idiot trying to get off? And, obviously went on to become, did I mention Moody about being competitive? Yeah. And the list of competitive riders, very competitive, Jim Moody. Everything had to be right. I
saw a quote that the writer and author Stewie Barker had put on Facebook.
I know Stuart Barker.
You know Stewie.
Yeah.
He said, but why were the Scottish riders so competitive? He said, we haven't driven all this way to finish second.
Well, that's a quote from Bob McIntyre and Alistair King.
Is it?
From the 60s, 50s.
Okay.
I've got Bob McIntyre's book upstairs.
Perfect.
Worshipped at the shrine of Bob McIntyre. You know what? If you want to test me on Bob McIntyre trivia, you'll be here for quite a while. Massive fan, even though he's a Scot.
Yes, indeed.
But Scots are famous for some good things. The whiskey's not bad.
Whiskey's all right.
The Scottish 6 Day is not bad. I think East Fortune Road Circuit is probably diabolical. Race Circuit is diabolical, but Knock Hill's acceptable, isn't it?
It's all right.
Yeah.
Duncan Vincent.
The charge through from Queen Larrick up to Fort William on a decent road bike is pretty good. The road to the Isles, to Malig, and then off to the Ardnamurchan Peninsula and the Isle of Mull, that's pretty good. So there's some. Oh, and we do a Highland 2-day classic at near Aviemore every year. I've ridden that with Ian Duffus and a bloke called Ryan Farquhar. He's quite
done a bit,
he's quite a well-known lad.
He's done a bit. Yeah,
he's still learning to ride trials bikes. And he might never get it. He might never get it dead right, but his race bikes are prepped pretty well. No, we rode that with Ryan, and I kind of spit the name out of the Donny McLeod. He rides the Highland 2-day classic. And Grant has ridden it,
of course. Donny McLeod, former teammate to Neal McKenzie
on the Armstrongs. Yeah. I remember the Armstrongs being worked on when I developed the CCM 4-stroke and then the 2-stroke for Armstrong CCM. I was doing the trials bike. Hence you saw that picture of me with Alan Clues and a very young-looking Nick Jefferies and a very young-looking Alan Clues with the first 2-stroke CCM trials bike.
Incredible.
In 81.
So as we just go a little bit back to that first win, tell me what the feeling crossing the line and standing on the top of the podium.
Unreal. I'm interviewed by Keith Hewin and if we come into the finishing area there, and it's on the video, it's on the TT
Gets everywhere,
video. Yeah, I know. And Keith Hewin's last race was the Macau Grand Prix, and we collided in that race, right the shit out of both of us, to be honest, on the back bit where it sort of goes left, right, left, right, left, right. And I first time there, I didn't know where I was going. And we actually went bang like that and collided. And I think it changed the colour of his underpants. So it did mine. But anyway, Keith comes in to interview me. And I've looked at the video and I'm talking absolute drivel for about a minute. Seems like 5 minutes. A bit like I'm doing now. Talking absolute baloney, cobblers. And I said something and I won't believe it. And I just don't believe I've won the TT. I won't believe it till I get up on the rostrum. And that's what I said at the end, which is about the only bit that made sense. Because I'm talking drivel about the fact it's been a good ride round. I always fancied doing a TT, looked a good ride round. And that's still my mandate, is that you get 2 hours of riding. You get 38 miles times 6. Because proper TTs, at least 6 laps, by the way. There's people that say they've won a TT after 1 lap, electric ride, or 2 or 3 lap. Famously, the 125 race in 51 was a 2-lap race. I thought that was okay. Won by Fermi McCandless, and whose brother Rex McCandless developed the featherbed Manx Norton. Okay, end of that trivia. Moving on. Yeah, 6-lap races are proper TT, surely. I mean, if Ian Duffers is listening, I think both his wins were 4-lap races, I'm pretty sure.
So they don't count?
No. Well, they sort of count. You have to accept them.
You don't mind for the Superstock and the Supersport.
Superstock, yeah. But the proper race bikes.
Your big race, your Superbike, your F1, your senior.
Laps. Correct, yeah.
100%.
I'm going to get that one in.
6-lap races, without a doubt. But you can only...
I don't think Jim Moody won a 6-lap race either. I'm only saying that because he's outside arm's length. No. I feel safe.
Because he can't reach
I feel safe.
Oh, dear.
So it was an unreal feeling. And the celebration for that win, I went in the press room afterwards, obviously champagne on the rostrum, Philip looking pretty fed up, and Steve Ward very happy, as Steve Ward always was, very cheerful. And the third was he was on his bike home, a private bike. Third was a win, first private man home. But Philip was a bit fed up, and he did go and win the senior, in fairness.
Because he was that pissed off.
Well, I was poorly for the senior. That's my excuse.
You came on with flu, didn't you?
I did. And you could tell from the voice when I did a voiceover for the lap I did, that lap on that TT race, I can hardly speak. And I had really bad flu. And if the race had been run on a Friday, I wouldn't have been out. I rode it on a Saturday and I got out of sick bed to ride. But I'm sure Philip would have still have won because A, it was wet and damp conditions, hated them, and B, my exhaust fell off, so I got black flagged. So I really sort of, what am I doing here? I finished without, I wired up, I think. I think the late Des Evans has just died. I think he wired it up at the bungalow. Probably not legal to do that.
No, but it is,
wired me up. I think it broke anyway. I know that because I got black flagged.
On your TT win, did Chris Mayhew do the engines?
No.
Who was doing the engines then?
Tony Scott.
It was Tony Scott's
the
engines.
The legendary Tony Scott, the man.
I know there's you're either Chris Mayhew engines or they're Tony Scott engines, aren't they? Through the time and through history.
I was 100% Tony Scott man. Well, Russell Saver did my Yamahas.
Okay.
Right. But Tony,
Sanyo,
Sanyo, great guy, and Scotty was just amazing, and I liked the last engine he did for me. I didn't actually race the bike, but the last RC30 he did before he died, or became unable to work on engines. But he famously did on the factory bike that I still have, he did the carburetors for that bike. He stripped and rebuilt the flat slide carbs, which were reputedly worth £20,000 back in the day.
Absolutely.
And he stripped and rebuilt those carbs. And Classic Racer did an article on it. And I don't know what year that would be 2012-ish. And there's a 4-page article about Scotty pulling those carbs to bits and rebuilding them. Those carbs were a thing of beauty. I mean, when we were I was at the Classic 100 Centenary Manx a couple of years ago. I had the bike on the promenade and all firing bikes up and crowds would gather around. So I got mine fired up and crowds gathered around. They love the sound of the RC30s. They sound really well. And there's this guy, Mick Robinson, who rode the Manx for years, lots of rostrum places. He was there taking a real interest. And I said, oh, Mick, have a look under the tank. So I got the tank undone the strap and lifted the tank up so you could see these 4 beautiful carburetors. And the lads just poured over these things. I said, okay, girls, you never mind, you don't need a decent pair of tits. You need a pair of flat slide carbs.
It got their attention, didn't it?
It got the girls all laughed, the lads laughed. It was
perfect.
It was the right line for this moment, because these lads, you could have had Raquel Welsh walking stark naked, but if a Honda 6 is there about to fire up, or my flat slides on the RC30, they're going to be paying attention to that. Never mind anyone.
Never mind that.
Claudia Schiffer, is it? I don't know. Stark naked.
If it's got boobs or wheels, it's going to cost you money.
Yeah. Oh, well, there you go.
in Well, we've got a couple of subjects that we need to talk about because the time is ridiculously pushing on. But I could.
Yeah, we're telling you. Yeah,
we're okay. No, we're good.
Let's just stop and feed this cat again.
We're good.
Quickly.
Go for it.
I'm very proud to have my picture taken with Carl Fogarty and Robert Dunlop in that. That's a picture I hold with great pride. One with Steve Hislop and Graham McGregor, and then the one with Joey and Philip and me in the 96 senior. And I am very proud. And there was with Roger Burnett and Joey. There's one with Ian Duffus and Colin Gable. There's one with Dave Leach and Alan Batson. So I've been on the rostrum, I think about 11 times, 18 times with the Manx, I think. So I'm always very proud to be. You walk up there to be garlanded. And I mean, I've said this at talks I've given. I mean, okay, I was very fortunate to be able to do that. But I also think it was important for the guy who finished 57th to go over that line and receive the checkered flag and to come in and put his back against, we used to put him against wooden poles years ago, and go in and have a drink with his team and celebrate the fact he's just done 6 laps in most cases. Yeah.
How many laps, Nick?
Well, it's 6. No, I mean, the proper TTs are 6 laps, you know. But to do the race. I mean, even the 3-lap races.
Whether you're seeded number 1 or whether you're the last man home. That shouldn't be lost on anybody. I think I had a bit of a praise at a dinner once I was speaking at and said, to my mind, and there was a well-known rider who'd won a lot of races, making quite a few boasts. And I said, look, you would have nothing to boast about if that lad over there and that lad over there hadn't come in and finished 8th, 10th, 12th, 20th, 30th, as in 80 starters. Someone has to finish behind you. Of course they do.
I can imagine, you can probably imagine who I'm talking about, but there's someone that talks about themselves a lot. But, you know, they were fantastic riders. But I said, look, you've got to have these people to make it a race. It's nothing. If it's just you turn up, you've beaten nobody.
No, exactly. It's just a race for yourself, isn't it?
And I've always loved the Manx Grand Prix. If we're tying up things now and say the Manx was a very important event to me, a club event, club riders who had no ambitions to be world champion. They weren't Halewards, they weren't Rosses. You know, they were just happy to get round and finish 50s. They worked on their own bike, saved all year to get to Alaman. You know, the big expense. And because nowadays you have to qualify in 6 events, which takes money away from the money they would spend on going to the Isle of Man. But going to the Manx Grand Prix to ride the Manx, that TT course, it is the most amazing course. How it's still there, I don't know. And long may it continue. But for me, it was one of the biggest thrills in my life. And if I lay me out tomorrow with my dying breath, I'll say, well, I've had a good life. I really have had a lot of fun. In fact, I would argue, compared to that lot, that lot, the names I've mentioned, I was probably, as Phil Reed said, enjoying it too much. I just bloody loved it.
I think that's refreshing, because so many, and Steve Plater said this on the show last week, that he almost said it was a bit of a waste of time, really, because I didn't enjoy it. I can't look back with, he knows his achievements, he knows what he's done, and he did well. But to actually be able to enjoy it is unique in the conversations that I've had over the years with riders, because they've been of a different mindset or a different place in time, but they've gone back and go, oh, it was so hard. It was still hard for you, but it was hard for anybody that raced the TT.
I think because I had such a good upbringing on the quarry, on the Terrier, to try and
understanding the joys of enjoyment and being allowing yourself to enjoy it is a huge step.
Riding to me was fairly easy, to a level.
Yes.
And it wasn't easy until once you got to the level with the Lampkins in trials,
yes,
and Rathmels, and Irio Vesterinen, world trials champion, and I know him very well. They were brilliant. And then racing, against Mick Grant, Rob Mack, Joey, and then moving on, Hislop, Fogarty, McAllen, Jim Moody, and I must mention Ian Duffus because he's a good mate. But they're all great guys, and they were fast. So suddenly, it wasn't that easy to ride at that level. You had to try. To ride at A level was very easy. So
when it come to the next step,
when I got to our peak, was 123 was a lap record when we were there. So to lap at 115, he could stop at Ramsey and have a chat with the marshals and get back on and finish at 115.
Yeah,
it was that easy. And probably now for Peter Hickman to go around at 130, he's probably got a minute spare to have a chat and still come in and lap at 130. And still, he stopped at Ramsey and said hello to his mates. Yeah, looked at the back tyre, got on with it,
give it a kick,
give it a kick and get off again. It'd still be 130. He got that much spare because at 136, which is phenomenal. How he sees where he's going and the strength to hold onto the bike. I think after the 1,000 cc's I did ride 1,000, FZR 1,000. On the Speedo, it's showing over 190 on the Speedo. It was fast. I don't think it was doing 190, but it showed it on the Speedo. There's not many folk who said, I've honestly seen a Speedo with 190 on it.
And then you see Josh Brooks doing 210 on 240 brake horsepower.
Yeah.
And speed gun 210.
Yeah. Well, I don't understand where the horsepower's gone. Okay, gone from 750 to 1,000. My RC30 still have the bike. It's not an RC30, it's a factory bike, it's an LOB. But that bike had 128 horsepower. And the most we ever had out of a really fit RC45 was coming up to 140, I think. I don't think we had more than 140. Well, the Supersport 600 bikes are past that now.
140, 145,
yeah. So how it's gone where a 1,000cc bike has 240 horsepower and how you can use that power. I mean, I'm sure Hutchie's told me now, and we haven't mentioned Hutchie, one of the great local West York, Bingley's Pride and Joy, one of the great riders of the current TT. And how they've coped. He's told me that the super bike is not as good to ride around there as the Superstock. The Superstock bike is a nicer ride around there.
Superstock bike holds a lap record.
Is that right? I think that
Hickey close. Set the lap record
on a Superstock bike.
Yeah. Yeah. The Stockers are a little more compliant than the Superbikes.
If you put a Formula One car on the TT course, this was this discussion that they had with John Surtees in 1964 when he won the car world title. Only man to do on 2 wheels and 4 wheels.
Absolutely.
He said he wouldn't be able to get a Formula One car around the TT course. No, well, if that was true in 64, it absolutely is true now.
Not a chance.
Not a chance.
No. Not with 15 mil ground clearance.
No. They couldn't get one round. So, in a way, super bikes and a MotoGP bike. I know Cameron Donald took a MotoGP bike round.
There's been a couple. Suzuki's been round, and Hilliard's been round on the H2 Turbo as well, and there's been all sorts of bikes gone round.
A good story about when Cameron Donald took that Suzuki round. Was it a Rizzler Suzuki?
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Right. Well, we're on the start line with my brother. I'm taking DJ's Suzuki round. It's a bit of a Suzuki thing, I think.
Yes.
So I'm behind, waiting to get on my bike to go around. When they've done a separate thing for Cam Donald with the Rizzler girls all there, looking pretty hot, might I add. And I'm sorry to say my girls might listen to this, but so anyway, there's this Geordie guy. This Geordie guy's there, he's not a marshal, but he's a hanger-on, but he's a rough-looking lad, Geordie. Not all Geordies are rough-looking lads, by the way. I love them to bits.
Just most of them.
But anyway, this Rizzler girl is asked to have a photograph taken on the bike. So she puts a trolley to one side and cocks the leg, is not an unfortunate expression,
But
over the seat of the bike. And this Geordie turns to me and says, in a Geordie accent, which I can't do, well, one thing's for sure, she's had a better shave than me this morning. Well, I told my brother that story, and it tickled. I must have told him it a few times because it always tickled him.
brilliant.
And there wasn't much left of the imagination when she cocked her leg over this bike. It was a bit of a highlight for this
It was
Geordie.
a highlight for that,
Yeah.
absolutely.
It says, well, I had a bit of a hangover, but I've come round a bit now.
It'll certainly wake you up. It'll always wake you up. You've segued beautifully there. Talk to me about David.
Aye. Well, I mean, David, you've got another 4 hours.
This is why I think we need a second.
Well, you'd have to do it. Yeah.
We need a
But,
second.
he was the finished product. Alan Jefferies was a pretty good all-round rider, on top of the tree in trials in '39 when the war broke out. Tony Jefferies would have gone on to do great things. He only won 3 TTs. You could argue I was pretty handy on an enduro trials bike. A bit sort of jack of all trades, I'm describing myself as. Not particularly mastered any of them, but half decent.
Yeah.
And no regrets, by the way, no regrets at all. If it come to David, who hadn't any time for trials bikes really, he would have carried on motocross, but he knackered his knees before he was 16 so badly that he couldn't carry on motocross. His ligaments had long gone, a bit like mine. So he got his chance to ride at a BMW demonstration day at Alton Park, underage, without me knowing even. My brother sneaked him out on a K75, flat as a pancake for power. But he said, I said, who's that going around there on that bike? He says, it's David. What? He's only 15, 16 or 15 like that. And Dave was charging around Alton Park, unbeknown, and in someone else's leathers. I think he was disguised as someone else. So no bother at all. Got round, piece of cake, gets to 16, and he's been doing his motocross, but he's on a fizzy, and everyone knows what a fizzy is. Charging around the Yorkshire Dales on a fizzy. 17, DT 125. No one can keep with him on a DT 125. And I'm very proud to say that I taught him to ride on an NVT Junior Ranger, aged about 7. Then his dad got him a TY80 for his 7th birthday, a TY80. And I'd also got him a little dart set, little sucker punch darts. Not darts, bows and arrow. Bow and arrow thing with sucker punches. So I gave him that to play with, and he's on his mates at his birthday. And then his dad said, take him in the garage and show him his bike. He didn't know. And he looked at the bike and said, well, your mum and dad have got you that. Pauline and Tony, they've got you the TY80. Because dad's in a wheelchair, so I'm taking him through to the garage.
Yeah.
So he came back and said, you better go and say thank you to mum and dad. He said, thanks, mum, thanks, dad. And he carried on playing with his bow and arrow outfit. So look at Tony and Pauline looking a bit forlorn that he spent more time playing with this is 7-year-old David Jefferies.
7-year-old David Jefferies.
So his first ever motocross race was 87. So he'd be just coming up towards 14 and a half. So I went with him as mechanic. And in the first practice, I wrote the back brake off. So I had to detach the back brakes. We did the rest of the day without a back brake. I disconnected it all. It was hanging down and broken off. But he probably crashed it and got back on again. But so I was the mechanic for the day. But he got round okay first motocross event. And he got to a stage where he was pretty good. And that stood him in good stead for doing Supermoto. He was a very good Supermoto
rider as well.
Yeah.
Well, I think there is, because I'm conscious of time for this afternoon. Would you have me back?
Well, it depends on how many people vote with the thumbs up. Is it a thing likes? Do you get likes, or dislikes?
Yeah, we prefer the thumbs up.
Well, see how many thumbs up go.
See how many thumbs up we get. I would love to come back and do justice to the Britain.
Well, that was out there last year, 12 months ago, exactly.
Yeah, we need to do justice to that.
Great privilege to have met John Britton, to have known him, to have ridden the bike. I'm the only Englishman to ever race that bike, so that's a privilege. And then to have taught David Jefferies to ride.
Exactly.
Done a few trials. I spent the bottom of Chris Boxing Day once, spent the whole of the Boxing Day afternoon when we should have been in the pub, trying to get his bike going again. Had a blocked filter going into the car, which took some finding, and not many tools on me at the time. We arrived at the pub late, which was bad. But
Should never do
so I remember that. David didn't really think much of trials, but it unbeknown to him, it was good education to learn in the wet. He was so good. He won the 2000 production TT in the wet. For Milky Quail, he was second.
Milky, bless him.
And on standard, no wet tyres in this race. He wouldn't allow you out in those conditions now. A lad lost his life at Balaf that year. Shouldn't be forgotten. Forget his name, but I know someone succumbed to the wet weather conditions. And it was horrific that I wasn't there that year. But David, he did what I did and Tony did. We rode, and the dad, we rode road bikes a lot. And nowadays, they don't ride road bikes. I'll be out on my road bike today. I ride most days still. And I think it's quite a good aerobic. Keeps me fit for golf.
Of course.
Fit for doing all sorts of things.
Mind sharp, and it clears the mind as well.
There's nothing I can't do now that I could do when I was 30, shall I say, without leaving anything to imagination. I'm a bit slow at a lot of things, but I can still get around a golf course, most importantly.
That's what matters.
And the trials course.
I think if we could do this after the TT this year.
Aye, okay.
Have a little break. You're going to be busy for the next few months, but if we can do something after the TT.
We've got plenty on.
Yes.
Meant to be at an auction today, but go on.
But as we did with this one, we booked 5 weeks in advance, didn't we? So
God, it was a while back. Yes, it was in the diary though. In fairness,
exactly. That's why I checked yesterday just to make sure that we were still on.
That was fair enough.
But what I have to do before we finish, we have our patrons who support the show every month. But with the patron scheme, we have 3 layers. You get early access to the show, or you have early access to the show, but chance to ask questions of the guests. And we have our guest questions for you, which are here now.
This is all. I'm unaware of this.
So am I, because I don't read them.
I haven't read them. Okay. Yeah.
No, I like to open them, and it's a nice surprise to me as well. So to finish off this fantastic chat, and thank you, Nick.
It's been fun just to bring back. There's quite a few more stories in there. I can't believe what time it is.
Well, this is when you look at
how anybody's going to listen to this. They must have better things to do. But bring it on.
There's
a lot of stories out there. I realise I've missed. Mostly decent, some indecent.
We like both.
I'll never forget backing into a caravan. Unbeknown to me, I was back in my caravan at Cadwell Park late at night, getting there late as usual, and backing into a caravan and upending it, so up on its side. And I'm sure he wasn't getting his bike ready. Put it that way. He wasn't getting his bike ready. He wasn't happy. The earth moved for him. But he didn't expect it. And I wasn't very popular. Parked next to him for the rest of the weekend.
Backing it in a different way.
You're backing in a different way.
Indeed.
A whole new meaning.
A whole new meaning to the word. Chris Turner, thank you, Chris. Which bike was the best / worst to ride at the TT and why?
Right, well, the best bike, that F-Stud R4 and the RR SP was a piece of cake, but was it a real racing bike? No. So race bikes, the best race bike was probably the Magic Carpet RC30, that NLOB factory bike. That was probably the best. And the most scary bike, where I most consistently got into a knot, was the RC45, because we didn't learn enough about offset. We needed Ron Williams, bless him, RIP, my Maxton guru, to teach me more about a steering offset, which we learned very quickly. We had to do it, otherwise we would no longer have lived. Because years ago, going down Bray Hill before the war, they just thought the right answer was just put a steering damper, a torque steering damper, turn it up tight, stop it going lock to lock. They hadn't learned about steering either. It's a gradual progression. Yeah. Believe me, the RC45, the original RC45, was pretty unrideable around a TT course, flat out.
For something of that level. Thank you, Chris. Simon Breeze, which victory in any discipline gave you your greatest satisfaction?
Well, probably the TT win. I was right chuffed to have the Manx 2-day win was my first national trials win. I got a Ulster Grand Prix win, and I was pleased about that because I wasn't just... And lots of wins at Scarborough. For 6 years, 5 years, I was a 600 champion at Scarborough. I used to love riding around there. Not always loved it, but generally loved Scarborough. So I answered that question properly. Probably have. Yeah.
That's fine. And he also goes on to ask, how do you view the differences between the TT and its current guise compared to when you raced there? Changed a little bit.
Purports to be a more professional race. And seriously, when you look at the pit stops and the starting procedure and the garland, the thing around the starting... what's the gantry?
The arch,
the arch.
Starting arch,
The pit stops are all in overalls, proper overalls, where you used to see people in jeans and probably smoking the odd ciggy even. No, they didn't do that. It all looks a lot more professional. Do they enjoy it more than we did? No. But it's still the same old TT course. You've got to get it right and keep it on the grey bit. As Joey would say, the grey bits, keep it on the grey bits.
You've got a green bit and a grey bit.
You've got a green bit and a grey bit. I prefer the grey bit, yeah.
And they've changed the profile of a couple of corners, haven't they? Windy corners changed a little bit.
They've completely bastardised the course. They're out of order doing that. They're completely out of order. And actually, I don't think they've made the road safer because it encourages people to drive faster anyway. They could have kept Brandish in and like Governor's Bridge, it's only open for the race. Done the bypass if you want, or the 2-lane if you want. But they could have kept Brandish in. I think that was very ill-advised. And it gives a false impression of how fast a TT is. It was a ridiculously fast bend now, compared to it was a really decent third gear corner. Fantastic recording of Hailwood and Agostini in a 67 senior, junior, because Hale was on a 6-cylinder. The best recording ever of listening to Hailwood and Ago coming down to Brandish separately. Hailwood on the 6 and Ago on the MV3. Best sound ever, but you can tell that Brandish is a hell of a lot slower then than it is now. So it's giving a false impression of how fast a TT is. The 136 of Hickman is not the 13, isn't anywhere near 136 in 1993 when I won. It might be 130. That's the difference.
And the smoothness of the course is becoming more and more, isn't it? It's like an accident to the carpet in some places
but
now.
Freddie Frith, he was with us still, to say, you want to look in his Lincolnshire accent, you want to look at it, the TT Mountain Mile, and it was only narrower than Scarborough. That really was narrower than Scarborough.
That's incredible to put it into perspective that way for those that have been to Oliver's Mount.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Thank you, Simon. From Mick Pringle, who's kindly sponsored this episode, from a rider's perspective, what set the Britain apart from the other bikes in class in '94?
Well, sadly, it didn't prove to be in a higher class, a different class. Yeah, very light, very rideable, very easy to ride. When it didn't go. Is it Mick Pringle? This guy,
Mick Pringle, yeah.
Mick Chris, was he? The Mick Chris. Anyway, did a good job. Does a good job because you can't open the packet without eating a whole lot.
Munch pop.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But anyway, the bike didn't stay running long enough because it's unreliable. But when it was right, it was very good. Had it had the top speed, I think the compression ratio was too high, the TT. So when it overheated, it lost its power. But it was potentially brilliant. And I mean, had it with a big factory developing it and reliability and maybe a lower compression, a better cooling, it would have been, you could have ridden around there. The bike was something like 30 kilograms lighter than an RC45, RC30. It was really light. It was easy to flick about.
Did I read
it steered well.
That I'd written, where is it? I'm sure I'd written that down somewhere. 166 horsepower at 138 kilos.
I have been doubts about that because we were riding 100 and, I don't think it did that horsepower, but okay, it's that way. We had
still not maybe.
We had 128 in 93.
Yeah.
A year later, I didn't go from 128 to 160.
166.
No, I didn't feel it was as fast as they were kept telling me
but
it was.
But at 130, even at 140 kilos, that's still light.
Yes, it picked its speed up. Coming out to Ballacrane, it was incredible. The corners like Ballacrane.
Yeah.
It just picked its speed up so quickly. It was really good. And so that's where it gained. But there weren't sufficient gains to counteract the massive unreliability.
Which is the difficult
and the overheating
side of it.
And the difficult to restart when you stop for a pit stop.
Thank you, Mick. Craig Lowe, are there any biking disciplines or events you haven't done but you would have loved to have done over your career?
Paris-Dakar.
Really?
Yeah, I think I'd have had Paris-Dakar, got my name all over it. Yeah, I could have liked that. I could have loved that. Pardon?
Fascinating.
Oh, I thought you said fast. Yeah.
No, fascinating because at the time that you could have done it, it was the original Paris-Dakar.
Yes, yeah, that would have been up my street. That long endurance events. I mean, the International 6 Days Trial in Italy I did in 74, age 22. It was really tough. I took a silver medal home. I pulled a few people out of windscreens. There were some big crashes. It was riding in Italy is dangerous, isn't it? Full stop. It is. It was like the Mille was the International 6 Days Trial, and they banned that.
Certainly did.
But I think Paris-Dakar was top of my list. I never did grass track or sand racing.
Jason
hill
Tuxworth
climbing.
round at Mablethorpe would have been a thing.
Tuxworth, yeah. Yeah. A mate of mine did it on the most unreasonable bike to do it ever, on ER6, ER5 even.
ER5.
But whatever. Tuxworth was a bit of a man around
He was good round Mablethorpe.
Never did stand racing, or Speedway. I never did Speedway.
Speedway, another one.
But I did have myself and John Reynolds all turned up at Sheffield Speedway one year for a special Boxing Day event. And they put a jump halfway down the main straights. We did it on motocross bikes.
Brilliant.
And it was sheet ice. The place had frozen over. And the bikes were so hard to ride around corners. So hard to ride. They weren't Speedway bikes.
And finally, any decisions over your career that you'd like to know what would have happened if you'd chosen another path? That's a great question.
It's a good question. It's a very good question. I mean, that's the whole afternoon talking about that. What the difficulty I had was, what I've not even touched on was, I was working full-time as sales director at Alan Jefferies. Sadly, no longer with us, Alan Jefferies, not only the person, but the shop that had been around since 1907. But I was working, hence I arrived late that night at Cadwell Park to upset that guy having an interesting evening. Because I arrived after work, finished work at 6, load up the van, and off to Cadwell Park. Get there at 10:30, 11 o'clock. Everyone else has been there all day, probably. We're always late to events. I won't say I was the late Nick Jefferies, but I was always... The work was very important to me, and that was the basic income and keeping the shop going. And that compromised my preparation for trials, for racing, for everything I did. So I'd love to have known, to answer that question properly, how good I would have been if I decided I was like the Rathmels and Lampkins, I'm full-time. That's all I do is prepare and practice and travel to trials and get ready in time. You know, I'd never have been as good as the Lampkins or Rathmels, and that's a fact. They were just absolutely brilliant, and the modern day riders beg a belief. And in racing, I'd never been as good as Hislop. I'd never been as determined as Carl Fogarty. I'd never been as determined as Philip McCallan. But I'd been probably better than I was, because I didn't have the opportunity to prepare, because I was working hard with my brother Tony, and he, bless him, he couldn't race, so I felt bad about taking time off to go racing, because he wasn't able to do it. He was able to do it better when Davey came along. So there's more about that later.
Brilliant. What a way to finish, Nick. Thank you so much.
Absolutely fantastic.
Privilege.
Oh,
Thank you very much
I'm amazed you think so. If anyone daft enough to listen to that lot, hope you have a good brew attached and a patient wife.
Ladies and gentlemen, the brilliant Nick Jefferies.
Well, wasn't that a history lesson? A massive thank you to Nick for his time. It was truly a pleasure to sit with him and listen to the stories from the TT and the world of trials as well. And I'm really looking forward to going back after the TT this year to learn about the Britain and hear more about the life of the great David Jefferies. A big thank you as well to Mick Pringle for sponsoring the episode. As we said at the top of the show, make sure you head down into the description, check out the Instagram and Facebook pages, give him a like and a follow. Next week, we'll either be at Huddersfield International Airport or we'll be sat right here talking to one of the fastest young Northern Irishmen in the Bennett's British Superbike Championship. Either James Whittam or Scott Swan. It'd be one of the two, and they're both coming up, whether it be next week or the week after. We're still waiting to hear back from Ruben Zaus. He should be coming up on the show in the not too distant future, and Fred Merkel as well. There's been a little bit of logistic issues with the pair of them, but certainly for Whit and Swanee, we've got them books in for next week, and we're really looking forward to it. So until then, thank you so very much for watching. And if you've got any recommendations for a guest, make sure you hit us up in the comments below as well, especially if you've got contact details as well. Have a fantastic weekend, and thank you so very much for watching. Do look after yourself. Bye-bye.